Chapter 125. Muffled footsteps were heard faintly coming from a far distance. It was the city guards of Ji City, who were marching towards them. The battle between Shi Tianma and the 6 ghost immortals in the sky had long alerted all the relevant government offices in Ji City. Hundreds of sky-patrolling eagle guards soared into the sky from all the scouting offices, bringing with them a dazzling blue gleam as they wheeled in the sky, sealing off the surrounding areas of mighty Marshall Street. Wuxia hastened his pace and came to the front door of the secret chamber, which was broken through by the 4 ghost immortals with brute force. This secret chamber of Shi Tianma was indeed well hidden. The entrance was located under a rockery in the backyard, in a deep well that went straight up into the sky. The depth of the well was over 1,000 feet, and the circumference of the well was less than 3 feet. Anyone with insufficient cultivation base would definitely be turned into a meat patty if they fell into it. The wall of the well was smooth and smooth, without any place that could be used as leverage. On top of that, there were several hundreds of bizarre runes engraved on it, emitting dazzling dark green, dark blue, and various other colors. According to the ghost immortals who broke through the restrictive spell, these runes contained a deadly poison, and any ordinary living beings would turn into pus and blood upon touching it. Fortunately, Wuxia had let the 4 ghost immortals sneak into this place, as all the deadly poisons under the heaven had no effect on these ghost immortals, who had no corporeal bodies. The deep underground shaft was filled with a gloomy aura, which allowed the 4 ghost immortals to avoid the sunlight, allowing them to unleash a stronger overall strength. With a round of violent bombardment from the phosphorescent flame and Yin thunder, they easily broke through all the restrictive spells on the shaft and entered the deep well. It was because these ghost immortals were experts in passing through walls with their shapeless bodies. Regardless of whether it was flowers, grass, soil, trees, rockery, or stone walls, they could just pass through everything. That was the reason why they could find this secret chamber in such a short period of time. If it were someone else, even the most seasoned investigator, it would not be so easy for them to find the entrance to the secret chamber in this rockery, which covered an area of over 1,000 feet in circumference. Before Wuxia could enter the deep well, Princess Zhonglu was the first to impatiently jump into the well, taking the lead and rushing into the secret chamber. Very soon, a buzzing echo came from underground. "I so many beautiful things, they are all mine, all mine. TSK, this Shi Tianma seems to be quite wealthy. How could he have so many jewelry?" Then Wuxia jumped into the well and quickly walked through a nearly mile-long secret tunnel, coming to a secret chamber that measured several hundred feet in both width and length, and was filled with numerous sandalwood racks. Just as Princess Zhonglu, who was shouting and cheering excitedly, had said, there were countless treasures placed on the wooden shelves here. There were no common objects like gold or silver here, only corals, hawksbill turtles, pearls, jades, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and other rare treasures. In the corner of the secret chamber, there were nearly 100 wooden boxes of various sizes, each of which contained a small hill of high-grade and top-grade spirit stones of various attributes. Wuqi's eyes lit up. Among these upper-grade and even supreme-grade energy stones, all of them had 5 elements, and there were even a dozen of them, which were extremely rare. They did not have any elemental properties, but contained the purest energy essence of the sun and moon. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then turned to Princess Zhonglu, who was holding a box of gemstones in her hand and laughing happily, and asked, "How are we going to divide these energy stones?" Princess Zhonglu threw a glance at the 100 feet wide pile of energy stones, shook her head and said, "What's the use? All these things in the secret chamber are going moldy. You can just take them all. If it is not enough, I'll send you more in 2 days." Wuxia was rendered speechless. Suddenly, he realized that this young girl standing in front of him was the princess of Great Yin Dynasty. Although these energy stones were of high quality and great quantity, for the Great Yin Dynasty, which had a history of over 2,000 years, they were just a drop in the ocean. Princess Zhonglu did not care about these energy stones, but Wuxia treasured them very much. He quickly walked over, threw away all the wooden chests, and kept all the energy stones into his storage ring. 8 ghost immortals stood in a straight line at the entrance of the secret chamber, glaring fiercely at Zhao Chenxue, Meng Xiaobai, and the others behind them. It was obvious that they were not allowed to come in. With these 8 ghost immortals guarding the entrance, no one dared to break into the secret chamber. Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu had enough time to divide all the various treasures in the secret chamber. Wuxia focused on all kinds of energy stones, and some rare objects that contained natural energies, while Princess Zhonglu was beaming with joy. She reached out her hand to all the treasures that shone the brightest, and had the most exquisite designs. There was a pale purple, half-transparent jade bracelet on both her left and right wrist, on which some runes could be vaguely seen blinking. They were 2 storage bracelets with a huge capacity. Princess Zhonglu smilingly searched through the secret chamber, and stuffed all the treasures that caught her eyes into the bracelets. While looting all the treasures in the secret chamber, Princess Zhonglu gave a loud laugh and said, "I didn't expect that a mere martial club could have such a rich wealth. Wuxia, now I understand why you came to martial club and stirred up troubles. Why don't I mobilize the army and my fief tomorrow and confiscate all the properties in Street of Mighty Martial? TSK, where did they find a peach of immortality carved out of such a huge piece of ruby?" With an enchanting smile on her face, Princess Zhonglu picked up a peach of immortality from a wooden shelf. It was as big as a bull's head, glinting brilliantly and without any blemish. It was a peach of immortality carved out of an entire piece of ruby, and its value could not be measured with money. Apart from the peach itself, there was also a tray carved into the shape of a leaf at the bottom of the peach, which was also carved out of a huge piece of flawless jade. A couple dozens of thumb-sized, perfectly round, and translucent silver pearls were rolling quickly on the leaf, looking no different from the dewdrops on the peach of immortality. Looking at the huge peach, a strange gleam flashed across Wuqi's eyes. It contained a very strong fire element energy, and it was not just an ordinary ruby, as it could be considered as one of the most precious natural treasures. On the other hand, the jade carved into the shape of a leaf was emanating a faint aura of green wood. It was also a rare and precious item. The wood element was the source of fire, and that was the reason why the peach of immortality was glistening with a bright red glow, as if it was a living creature. On the other hand, the couple dozens of pearls were hovering on the leaf, faintly emanating a bone-piercingly cold energy essence. Surprisingly, the core of these pearls contained a thread of innate Kuei water energy essence. Not only did the energy essence nourish the leaf carved from the jade, making it look especially lustrous and translucent, it had also sealed the fire energy contained in the ruby, preventing it from spreading wantonly. Water element, wood element, fire element, white, green, and red energy intertwined with each other on the surface of this extraordinary treasure, transforming into a dense mist that enveloped the entire peach of immortality. What a treasure! I love it! Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes, smiling so widely that the corners of her mouth and eyes curved into the shape of a crescent moon. On the other hand, Wuqia could tell that this peach of immortality was not an ordinary decorative treasure, but a magical treasure that had gone through the preliminary refining. Only by going through the last few steps of refining, it would become a treasure that had fused the energy of water, wood and fire elements, and could unleash innate water, wood thunder, and fire ray to injure the enemy. Judging from the overall strength Shi Tianma had shown, he did not have the ability to produce a treasure like this, and it seemed like his cultivation technique did not require any external items. All of a sudden, Yen Bugui's cautious voice was heard coming from the secret passage. "Your Highness, I, Yen Bugui, have some impression of this peach of immortality. 3 months ago, Yen Qingchen, the Prince of Yi, celebrated his 600th birthday, and his youngest son, who was in Feftu and Qiu, presented this peach of immortality to him. In Mount Jiayin, which is 3,000 miles away from Ji City, all the tributes were robbed by someone, and none of the 3,000 soldiers who escorted the tributes survived. This case is currently being investigated by Scouting Office." Princess Zhonglu, who was having a complacent smile on her face, suddenly opened her eyes. She turned to look at Yen Bugui, who was peeking out from the secret passage, and said angrily, "What are you trying to say? This treasure belongs to me now. Since it was robbed by a thief, it is now an item without an owner. Now that I've snatched it back from the thief, it belongs to me. This is a matter of course. If anyone dares to talk nonsense, you can ask Yen Qingchen to come talk to me." Yen Bugui coughed dryly, then said carefully, I just want to tell your highness that since this peach of immortality is found here, it is highly possible that Shi Tianma is the culprit who closed the case. Most probably, the other precious treasures in this secret chamber are also looted by him from all over the place. Your highness, please understand that the value of all the precious treasures in this secret chamber is priceless. No matter how big Shi Martial Club is, it is nothing but a martial club. How could it afford to buy so many rare and precious treasures? Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes, carefully stroking the peach of immortality in her arms. She nodded her head thoughtfully and said, Is that so? All the precious treasures in here are stolen goods? Since we can't find the culprit, we might as well put them into the national treasury. Since they are in the national treasury, they are no different from my belongings. Therefore, it is reasonable for me to take them away now. If Minister of Justice Haoying Zhengqi is not convinced, he can ask him to come talk to me. Hugging the rare peach of immortality tightly in her arms, Princess Zhonglu kept praising it. Then, she conveniently shoved it into her bracelet. In terms of seniority, Prince Yi Yin Qingchen was the nephew of Princess Zhonglu. However, to Princess Zhonglu, robbing the birthday tribute of her nephew was a matter of course, and there was nothing to be embarrassed about. As long as she had her eyes on something, it would be hers. As for the 8 governors, she could just ask them to step aside. Shaking his head, Wuxia did not put the so-called robbery of tribute in his heart. Since Shi Tianma had the courage to kill Yan Buji, what was the big deal about robbing some tributes? Throwing away all the dazzling and glittering treasures, Wuxia fixed his eyes on a pile of silvery white, translucent crystals on top of 2 wooden shelves at the innermost part of the secret chamber. They were shrouded in starlight and mist. He rubbed his eyes with a look of disbelief, strode to the pile of crystals. Seizing the opportunity when Princess Zhonglu was not paying attention to him, Wuxia waved his hand and shoved all over 200 silvery white crystals, ranging from the size of a human head to the size of a fist, into his storage ring. He placed them in the innermost layer of the ring, then wrapped them with a large pile of energy stones. Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Wuxia turned to the other wooden shelves as if nothing had happened. From them, he took out some materials such as 10,000-year-old essence cold ice and shoved them into his storage ring. These materials were useless to ordinary people, and if they were carelessly touched by them, it would bring great harm to them. However, for cultivators, no matter it was crafting flying swords or unusual magical treasures, these materials were always useful. After a long while, Wuxia finally calmed down his mind. In fact, those silvery white crystals were actually some kind of energy metal, or that was contaminated by the aura emanated from the dimensional ripples. It was called spatial breaching spirit gold, and it had a structure similar to that of a metal and a crystal. It possessed a very unique power, and it was the core material used by cultivators to construct their Immortal's Cave, and to construct a super long-distance minor universal teleportation formation. A minor universal teleportation formation, with spatial breaching spirit gold as its core, could teleport a person several tens or millions of miles away. The amount of energy consumed was negligible, and the ripples of energy emanated from it were very weak as well. As for a minor universal teleportation formation without spatial breaching spirit gold as its core, it would be just like what happened to Princess Yingchuan, who had to empty the national treasury of the Lu Kingdom and consume all the high-grade energy stones in the treasury. Only then could he teleport her from the Lu Kingdom to Ji City. With over 200 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold, if they were cut reasonably and used sparingly, it would be more than enough for Wuxia to construct over 1,000 minor universal teleportation formations for a single person, or nearly 100 teleportation formations for 100 people. With these spatial breaching spirit gold, some of Wuqi's ideas could be gradually put into practice. For example, he could construct a few Immortal's Cave in a secret place deep within Meng Mountains. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. This was a key point mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing. How could any qualified thief not have at least a few dozens of backup routes of retreat? These spatial breaching spirit gold were the biggest harvest for Wuxia today. With them, Wuxia would finally have the confidence to survive and develop in this world. Chapter 126. After looting all the treasures in Shi Tianma's secret chamber, under the persuasion of Wuxia, Princess Zhonglu, whose eyes were flickering with a five-colored gleam, finally left behind a few stolen goods for Wuxia, asking him to pack them up and send them to scouting office as evidence of their crimes. Apart from these precious treasures, they also found some account books, documents, and some other things in the secret chamber. However, no matter it was Wuxia or Princess Zhonglu, neither of them had any interest in them, and thus, all of them were taken away by the scouting office. Apart from the priceless treasures in the secret chamber, there were also a few warehouses in the backyard of Swordsmanship Club, filled with gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After operating in G City for over 90 years, apart from the treasures obtained from robberies, Swordsmanship Club had also earned quite a lot from its legitimate business. The total value of all the treasures found in these warehouses was at least 1 million. Wuxia conveniently took out some gold ingots and silver ingots and put them into his storage ring, leaving the copper coins untouched. On the other hand, Princess Zhonglu had completely ignored these treasures. The reason why she looted all the treasures in the secret chamber was because she found them to be very beautiful. Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu, who had their wealth increased dramatically, walked out from Swordsmanship Club with a smile on their faces. They happened to see Shi Tianma squinting his pair of deep eyes, laughing at the secret agents of scouting office who were guarding him. His shoulder blades were broken, and all 36 important acupoints in his body were broken, causing all the innate energy in his body to be drained. Despite that, he still arrogantly threatened those secret agents of scouting office, saying that he would find out their relatives and kill all of them. Seeing Shi Tianma still being so arrogant despite having fallen into such a dire situation, Princess Zhonglu knitted her brows, pointed her finger at him and said, "How presumptuous! Somebody, pull out all his teeth and replace them with dog teeth. Apply some 9 jade bone healing ointment on them, and let him grow a mouthful of solid dog teeth. I'd like to see how this fellow, who barks like a wild dog, is going to show himself in front of others after he grows a mouthful of dog teeth." Wuxia shuddered. Where did Princess Zhonglu learn these humiliating methods? Logically speaking, she, who was born deep in the palace, should not have come into contact with these things. The Juyu bone healing ointment was a secret medicine concocted by the imperial clan of Great Yin Dynasty. When one's limbs were broken, as long as the blood was still warm, the wound could be healed quickly by applying this ointment. Wuxia pulled out Shi Tianma's teeth and gave him a mouthful of dog teeth. After that, he smeared the 9 jade bone healing ointment on them. With that, the dog teeth would fuse together with Shi Tianma's gums, and there would be absolutely no rejection. As the most renowned grandmaster in the Jianghu of Great Yin Dynasty, Shi Tianma was humiliated in such a way. If that were the case, he would never be able to face anyone again. Shi Tianma's face flickered between pale and green. He gave Princess Zhonglu a fierce glare, threw his head back and roared furiously, "Forget it. I've been a man who has run amok all my life. How can I be bullied by a woman like this? Forget it, forget it. My master will definitely avenge me. All of you, just you wait. Your 9 clans will all die." After letting out 3 wild roars, Shi Tianma turned to Shi Wugo, who was tied up in the same way, and said furiously, "My son, why don't you kill yourself now? Are you going to wait for them to humiliate you like this?" Shi Wugo gave his father a look, threw his head back and cried out wildly, "Master, please avenge me and my son." All of a sudden, loud noises of countless steel bars breaking were heard coming from Shi Wugo's body. Pale green blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and in just a blink of an eye, he had lost all signs of life. Shi Tianma let out a wild cry as loud noises of thunder were heard coming from his body. After that, dark green and sticky blood sprayed out from his 7 apertures. His body twitched violently for a while, and then he too committed suicide with a mystic technique. The secret agents of scouting office standing right next to both father and son did not have the time to react, and could only watch them die with their own eyes. There were even 2 secret agents of scouting office standing too close to Shi Tianma. The blood that sprayed out from his 7 apertures sprinkled onto their arms. Like a concentrated acid, it scorched and rotted their skin, emitting a pungent smell of grass and wood. Both secret agents shrieked miserably. Greatly shocked, Wu Qi sprung forward, pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf and chopped off their arms. Before their arms could touch the ground, they were burned into ashes by the green-colored blood. Everyone on the scene gasped at the same time. How could Shi Tianma's blood be able to withstand such a deadly poison? Wu Qi's eyes flickered. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the nostrils and the veins on their necks. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "Well, they are two good men. Don't disgrace their dead bodies. Xiaobai, bring them out of the city and bury them in a place with good feng shui." Wu Qi told Meng Xiaobai that he was going to find a place with good feng shui to bury them, but he actually transmitted his voice to Meng Xiaobai, asking him to bring the corpses out of the city and find a random place to dig a hole. After that, he would bring the corpses back and hide them in Duke Yanli's mansion. Wu Qi especially reminded Meng Xiaobai to be extra careful when he entered the city, and not let anyone notice that he brought the dead bodies back. Meng Xiaobai's expression remained unchanged. He answered and beckoned to Zhao Qinzue. A group of over 100 guards from Duke Yanli's mansion drove a large chariot, carrying the dead bodies of Shi Tianma and his son out of the city. No one from scouting office had any objection to Wu Qi's order. Since Shi Tianma and his son were dead, what was the point of keeping their dead bodies? Although the cultivation technique they were practicing was a little strange, since they were dead, they couldn't interrogate them to find out the cultivation technique they were practicing. So, what was the point of keeping their dead bodies and stewing them? Only Wu Qi was sneering in his mind. Shi Tianma and his son had committed suicide because they were unwilling to be humiliated. They might have fooled the others, but not Wu Qi. In the scroll of stealing, there were over 100 different cultivation techniques of pretending to be dead, and each of them was 1,000,000 times more advanced than the evil cultivation technique used by Shi Tianma and his son. This was the meaning of Lord Guan Yu's sword dance in front of the temple. Since both father and son wanted to pretend to be dead, Wu Qi would fulfill their wish, bringing them into Duke Yanli's mansion so that he could give them a good treatment. Upon thinking of the enormous blood and energy essence contained in the bodies of Shi Tianma and his son, Wu Qi couldn't help but drool. In order to win the trust of others and prove that they were really dead, this father and son had actually used a mystic technique to shatter their meridians, nearly wiping out all the life force in their bodies, leaving only a tiny bit of life force in their hearts. If no one came to rescue them within 72 hours, they would be dead for sure. During these 72 hours, they were really dead men, and there was no need to worry about any unforeseen events happening to them. Looking at Meng Xiaobai and the others who were leaving, Wu Qi pursed his lips into a smile. After that, he cupped his fist toward Princess Zhonglu in a solemn manner. "Zidan, I'm sure you've heard about what happened in Shi Martial Club." With a serious expression, Wu Qi told Princess Zhonglu, "I never expected that Shi Martial Club is actually a den of bandits who hide all the filthy things. Although the main culprit has committed suicide, there are still so many accomplices, and we still have a lot of things to do. I need to inform our young master about the assassination of Yan Buji, but we can't leave this place unattended. What if someone cheated and released the suspect without permission? Wouldn't all our efforts be in vain?" Gently, Wu Qi tucked back a strand of hair that fell before Princess Zhongli's forehead, chuckled and said, "You stay here and keep watch. Ask the men from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office to investigate this case thoroughly. You must urge them to investigate this case with all their heart and soul, and find out if there are any other crimes committed by Shi Martial Club." Hearing that Wu Qi wanted her to stay here and keep watch, Princess Zhongli's heart was filled with reluctance. She pulled Wu Qi's sleeve and murmured in a low voice, "Wherever you go, I'll follow you. I'll leave Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer here. With them here, who would dare to mess around?" Wu Qi smiled, then he moved closer to Princess Zhongli's ear and whispered, "Not only do I need to supervise Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office in handling this case, I also need Zidan to help me occupy such a large courtyard in this Shi Martial Club. I'm planning to open a martial club here. Without Zidan's help, no matter what, I will never be able to own this courtyard in this golden section of the road." Sighing lightly, Wu Qi stared deeply into Princess Zhongli's eyes and said, "Wu Qi has no relatives in this world. Apart from Zidan, no one can help Wu Qi handle this matter." Princess Zhongli's spirit was immediately lifted. She stuck out her chest, tilted her chin up complacently and said, "So you're the one who wants this martial club? Don't worry, Zidan will handle it properly for you. Who dares to fight me for something that I've taken a fancy to? As for this martial club, it will definitely belong to the Imperial Treasury. Everything in the Imperial Treasury is my property, and everything that belongs to me is yours." Wuxia narrowed his eyes and smiled, gently stroking Princess Zhongli's hair. Yen Bugui and the others were staring blankly into the sky. Everything in Great Yin Dynasty's Imperial Treasury was equal to Wuxi's property? Were they hallucinating? Although Princess Zhonglu had the courage to say something like that, none of them had the courage to listen to it. They had no idea how Yin Dan would feel when he heard what his most precious granddaughter had said. What kind of thoughts would he have? The complacent Princess Zhonglu simply carried a large chair and sat in the main hall of Martial Club, giving orders to all the officers from Criminal and Justice Court, patrolling officers, and captains of City Defense Army who came to Martial Club. With this mighty deity in charge, the Judicial Department and the Force Department in G City began to operate at an unprecedented efficiency. Very soon, according to the account books and other items found in Tianma's secret chamber, they had determined that Martial Club was related to many robberies that happened in the area 10,000 miles around G City in the recent decades. G City was the absolute political and economic core of Great Yin Dynasty, and all the rare and precious treasures under the heaven were gathered here. Those merchant caravans and tribute teams from various vassal kingdoms of Great Yin Dynasty would bring an astronomical amount of treasures. Martial Club had been robbing for several dozens of years, and the treasures they obtained were far more than what was found in the secret chamber. Including the treasures that Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu had embezzled, they only accounted for less than 1% of the total looted over the years. According to the numerous account books and documents found in the secret chamber, the mood of the officers from Criminal and Justice Court was getting more and more excited, and the atmosphere was getting tenser and tenser. The crimes committed by Martial Club were far more than what they were. From the records in those account books, one could vaguely tell that there was a deeper conspiracy behind Martial Club. For example, there was a pale golden account book, on which a large number of names and numbers were recorded. If they were not mistaken, this was the record of Tianma bribing some officials, and it could also be the record of the merchants who helped Martial Club sell the stolen goods, helping them dispose of the stolen goods. More and more elite officers from Criminal and Justice Court arrived at this place, and the elite investigators from Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office were like flies that had smelled the scent of blood. Over 30% of the patrolling officers and secret agents in G City of Great Yin Dynasty had cordoned off the entire mighty Martial Street, while an army of several tens of thousands of elite soldiers had completely sealed off all the streets on the left side of the street. Even the city gates on all four sides of the city wall had been shut. The captured apprentices of Martial Club were quickly brought away, including the personal guard of Wei Xiaoxiao, who was personally captured by Wuxia. As it was ordered by Wuxia, the security around this personal guard and a few of his attendants was extremely tight. While everything was being carried out in an orderly manner, several dozens of burly men, who were clad in the official uniform of Criminal and Justice Court and the standard soft armor of Scouting Office, suddenly struck at the same time. They drew out their weapons and hacked towards those apprentices who were being escorted, then casually chopped off their heads. It was unknown what kind of drug was applied to the weapons used by these men. After chopping off their heads, the skulls quickly burst into flames and turned into ashes in just a blink of an eye. It happened so suddenly that none of the patrolling officers and secret agents on the scene could react in time. Even the personal guard and attendant of Wei Xiaoxiao who were captured by Wuxia had their heads chopped off by someone. Sparks burst out in all directions, and their heads were quickly burned into ashes. Chapter 127. It all happened too suddenly. After those capable men, who were clad in official outfits, casually swung their blades and killed several dozens of disciples and instructors, they began to attack anyone in their line of sight. No one had expected that the men from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office would suddenly do something like this. In just a few seconds, over 300 patrolmen and secret agents of Criminal and Justice Court had died under the blades. When the surrounding people finally reacted, the beast warriors of Scouting Office let out long and furious roars, transforming into the shadows of beast souls behind their backs and leaping forward. But these men, with their faces expressionless, raised their blades and chopped at their own necks. A couple dozens of streams of blood sprayed out, as they had actually chopped off their own heads. Countless patrolmen and secret agents in the surroundings could not help but gasp at the same time. Not only were they ruthless to others, they were also extremely ruthless to themselves. Men of sacrifice, no doubt about it. Who was the person who could cultivate such men of sacrifice? What was even more frightening was that these men of sacrifice had already blended into the judicial system of Great Yin Dynasty. Who was the person who could have such a heaven-defying method to plant so many men of sacrifice in criminal and justice court and scouting office? All the disciples and instructors of the martial club who were killed by them had their heads burned into ashes, and no one could identify their faces and origins. It was obvious that they were trying to silence all the witnesses. But who could be so efficient as to give the order to silence all the witnesses right after Sher Martial Club was raided? Perhaps he had lost his mind, as an official from Criminal and Justice Court suddenly cried out in a loud voice, "Protect Her Highness, protect Princess Zhonglu." Just as the official, who was eager to show his loyalty, let out a loud cry, Princess Zhonglu gave him a slap on the face and knocked him several hundred feet away. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Disgustedly, Princess Zhonglu gazed at the unlucky official, clenched her teeth and said in a cold voice, "Do I need to be protected by a bunch of useless fools? Good, very good. Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office. I can't believe there is someone among you who is colluding with the bandits. Inform Haoying Jingqi and Qin Qingshui, and ask them to apologize to my imperial grandfather." She stomped her feet and glanced at the head and half-body of Wei Xiaoxiao's guard who was captured by Wuxia. With a frown, Princess Zhonglu said, "Send someone to inform Vice Premier Gao Jianli that the people from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office are no longer reliable. Send the men of Swallow here, and everyone here, investigate the bloodline of 6 generations, and all the interpersonal relationships. Everyone listen to this Empress. Keep a close eye on the colleagues around you. Whoever dares to wander around will be killed without mercy. If there are any mistakes, blame the 3 clans." Many of the officials present responded loudly, but their faces were as pale as snowflakes. Gao Jianli was in charge of the Swallow, a secret spy organization that was independent of all the government offices in Great Yin Dynasty. For so many years, no one knew what the Swallow had done, but everyone knew of its fearsome reputation. When Princess Zhonglu sent someone to inform Gao Jianli, asking him to take over the management of this place, the incident had really blown up. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Qin Qingshui arrived with a large group of secret agents. His pale donkey face was filled with an unconcealable panic. With the quickest speed he could muster, he came before Princess Zhonglu and cried out sternly, "Your Highness Zhonglu, just let me investigate this thoroughly. Why bother Vice Premier Gao Jianli?" Princess Zhonglu gazed at Qin Qingshui from the corner of her eyes, then shook her head disdainfully. Qin Qingshui's face turned ashen, as if all his spirit, energy, and spirit were sucked out in an instant. He nearly fell to the ground. With Gao Jianli intervening, and the Swallow taking over the investigation, wouldn't the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office be thoroughly investigated? Oh heaven! During the years when Qin Qingshui was in charge of the Central Wind Guard, he had done too many shameful things, and it was too late for him to cover them up now. When these men of sacrifice attacked to silence the witness, Wuxia had already arrived at Swordsmanship Mansion, and came straight to the main hall. The emissary of the Gaoling Kingdom was being pressed to the ground by a group of ferocious servants of Swordsmanship Mansion, who were using an iron wooden stick as thick as a bowl to slap his buttocks. A low-ranking official was standing beside him and counting. Meanwhile, a few middle-ranking officials of Swordsmanship Mansion were standing at the side, loudly reproaching the emissary of the Gaoling Kingdom for his crimes. From disrespecting the suzerain kingdom to shouting in the court, there were at least 17 to 18 crimes. Each crime was punished with 30 strokes of the stick. With over 500 strokes of the stick, perhaps this emissary of the Gaoling Kingdom would be beaten to death. A group of guards with swords drawn were standing guard outside the main hall, surrounding the emissary and his personal guards, not allowing them to move. The people of the Gaoling kingdom were looking at the emissary being punished with a pale face, panicking and not knowing what to do. Wuxia gave these people a cold glance, then strode into the main hall. This was much better than the plan she had when she came to the Gaoling kingdom. After giving a peach in return, Princess Yingchuan happily pondered over the terms and conditions of the alliance between the three parties. Smilingly, she gave Lu Qingfeng a wink and said, "Duke Yanlu, Yingchuan has something important to report to Duke Yanlu. It is related to your biological father, Duke Buji." The emissary of the Lishan kingdom had a pair of sharp eyes. Upon seeing Princess Yingchuan's bashful expression, he rose hastily and bid his farewell. The relationship between the Lu kingdom and Tai clan was very close to the Lishan kingdom, so naturally, they knew it very well. Since Princess Yingchuan had brought up the matter related to Yan Buji, it was obvious that she wanted to use this matter to ease the conflict between the Lu kingdom and Tai clan. If the emissary were to stay here any longer, it would be a little inconsiderate. Lu Qingfeng personally sent the emissary off from Zhuguozheng mansion. Only then did he return to the main hall. He turned to look at Princess Yingchuan with a smile and said, "I wonder what's the matter, Princess? It is related to my father. Don't tell me that Lu Suifeng is also the son of my father and princess?" At this moment, Lu Qingfeng made fun of Princess Yingchuan. Princess Yingchuan blushed, winked at Lu Qingfeng coquettishly, smiled and said, "What are you talking about? How could Duke Buji fall in love with a girl like Yingchuan?" Princess Yingchuan straightened her face, then said with a solemn expression, "Yingchuan has to apologize to Duke Yanlu first. My son Suifeng has offended Duke Yanlu with his rude behavior. I hope you can forgive him." Lu Qingfeng waved his hand indifferently and said, "Never mind, I've already forgotten all those things. Princess, you don't have to wonder why I would come to an agreement with you today. It's just that the Gaoling kingdom has a rather strong national strength among all the vassal kingdoms in the west. How could Tai clan possibly swallow such a big piece of fat meat? There is no grudge between Princess and me. Naturally, I understand what is the most beneficial choice I have to make." Princess Yingchuan was taken aback, then she quickly said, "But Yingchuan, the matter here is..." Wuxia interrupted Princess Yingchuan. Wuxia had already told Lu Qingfeng everything about what Lao Ai told her. Both of them were unwilling to waste their breath on this matter. If they really heard Princess Yingchuan telling Lu Qingfeng that Sher Martial Club was the one who carried out the assassination of Yan Buji, then they would owe him a favor for no reason. So why bother? Casually throwing out Yan Buji's token, Wuxia said with a stern voice, "Young master, today, Wuxia went to the martial club that we had our eyes on last time to challenge it, planning to seize its foundation and open a martial club in G City for young masters' use. In the end, I found this token in the secret chamber of Sher Martial Club. Sher Martial Club should be the culprit behind the assassination of Duke Buji." Lu Qingfeng turned pale with fright and leaped to his feet. "What? Sher Martial Club is just a common martial club. How could they have such audacity?" Princess Yingchuan turned pale with fright as well. She cried out with a sharp voice, "What? Why did you do that to Sher Martial Club? How did you?" Looking at the token thrown out by Wuxia and engraved with the words Duke Yan Buji, Princess Yingchuan was struck dumb and couldn't say a word. Didn't the sect leader of Great Sun Sect, Lao Ai, in her mind, tell her that not even the scouting office had discovered the shady dealings of Sher Martial Club? In G City, was it only Lao Ai who had vaguely realized that Sher Martial Club was not as simple as it seemed? How could this opportunity to repair the relationship between the Lu Kingdom and Tai clan slip away from her hands just like that? Had Wuxia really done something to Sher Martial Club? And he even found out the evidence of Sher Martial Club assassinating Yan Buji? Princess Yingchuan felt a buzzing noise ringing in her head. What Wuxia and Lu Qingfeng had done was like a stick that had knocked on her head, making her feel dizzy and had no idea where she was for a long time. Intentionally, Wuxia did not look at Princess Yingchuan, whose face had turned pale. He just repeated everything that happened today to Lu Qingfeng. According to his description, he and Lu Qingfeng had already had the ambition to attack Sher Martial Club half a month ago, And it was only today that they borrowed the power of Princess Zhonglu and attacked Sher Martial Club. While both men were playing the same trick, Princess Ingchuan's beautiful face turned gloomy, and she did not know what she was feeling in her heart. It was such a good opportunity to make friends with Lu Chengfeng. How could it slip away just like that? They had already caught the culprit. Yet she still told them that Shi Tianma was the one who assassinated Yan Buji. What was the point of telling them this? Right at this moment, a troop of soldiers, clad in black iron armor, and shrouded in a cold aura and expressionless faces, rushed into the hall. The captain who led the troop gave the hall a glance, then cried out in a deep voice, "Where is Marquis Tianyan Wuqi? Chief General Jing Ke summons you." Chapter 128. 500 miles north of Ji City. There was a dense forest that measured several hundred miles in circumference. This forest had been growing for several thousand years, and giant trees that were over 1,000 feet tall could be found everywhere. Wisterias grew luxuriantly in the forest, and countless exotic flowers and grasses could be seen growing in it. There were even a few excellent quality energy veins running underneath the ground. Usually, the forest would be shrouded in white mist, with white cranes and green sparrows flying back and forth in the sky. Snakes and dragons would appear and disappear from time to time. According to the common people in Ji City, there were immortals living in this forest. No matter what kind of rumors were spread by the common people, it was a fact that this forest was a forbidden land controlled by the army of Great Yan Dynasty. Under the lead of the group of armored soldiers, Wu Qi sprinted at top speed for nearly 10 minutes. Relying on the extremely fast speed of his mount, he finally arrived at the edge of this nameless forest. Upon approaching the woods, Wu Qi felt uneasy all over his body. The combat instinct inherited from Wu Wang told Wu Qi that there were people hiding in every corner of this place. They and their group had been locked down by at least a couple dozens of large machines, and there were at least 300 pairs of eyes locked onto them. The defense was extremely tight, even tighter than the defense of the imperial palace of Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi glanced to the left and right. He could vaguely sense a few small mounds on both sides of the road, which seemed to be the hidden firing points. Apart from that, he couldn't find anything strange. The captain raised a pale green token high up in the air, and injected his inner force into it. Immediately, a clear and melodious cry of swallows soared into the sky. A few whistles were heard coming from a distance. The captain gave out an order, and the group of soldiers continued riding along the road into the dense forest. At the same time, the gaze that he sensed had also disappeared without a trace. The road in the dense forest was only about 20 feet wide. Both sides of the road were surrounded by giant trees and long grasses. From time to time, a large group of monkeys would jump from one side of the road to the other side of the road, chirping noisily while throwing a few fruit cores to Wu Qi and his company. A large flock of birds were gliding across the sky gracefully, and large sheets of bird droppings were falling down like raindrops, staining everyone's face and head. Fortunately, Wu Qi was protected by his innate energy. The bird droppings were deflected away when they were still a few feet away from him. However, they caused the soldiers around him to have dozens more bird droppings on them. After walking along the main road for a dozen miles, two fierce tigers rubbed their bodies against each other. Then they came out from the bushes with two cubs that were obviously still drinking milk. They lazily lay down on the main road and basked in the sun. The group had no choice but to walk down the main road and detour around the family of four through the forest at the side before continuing on the main road. In the end, they hadn't even walked a few miles when a group of wild boars ran across the road with sharp cries of joy. Smoke and dust billowed, and they were immediately delayed again. Finally, this group of huge wild boars crossed the main road and walked for about 20 miles. Then 7 or 8 huge pythons, which were as thick as water buckets, covered with white scales, had a horn on their heads, and claws could be vaguely seen under their abdomens, blocked their way, and were about to transform into flood dragons. These huge pythons were curled up lazily on the main road. The sun shone down through the branches that had been cut above the main road, making them feel very comfortable. They kept sticking out their long tongues. This time, even Wu Qi couldn't help but be shocked. The fierce tigers and wild boars were just ordinary wild beasts, but their bodies were especially strong. and the blood and qi in their bodies were more than 10 times stronger than their kind on Earth. However, they were just wild beasts. These 7 or 8 huge pythons were about to transform into flood dragons, and there was a faint pressure coming from them that made Wu Qi's heart tremble with fear. They had already formed the Jin Dan in their bodies. If their bloodline was a little lower, they would be able to transform into human forms, just like the Xiong brothers. However, these pythons were huge in size, and their bloodline was that of flood dragons. Therefore, it was much more difficult for them to transform into human forms than the Xiong brothers. According to Wu Qi's estimation, unless they survived the Thunder Tribulation and transformed into flood dragons, then cultivated to the nascent soul realm, and molted at least 2 times, these pythons would be able to transform into human forms. But even now, their strength was much stronger than that of ordinary Jin Dan human immortals. These pythons coiled up on the main road, staring at Wu Qi and the others with their intelligent eyes. There was actually a hint of unruly and cunning in their eyes. They put on a posture that said Lao Tzu would not give way, stretched their bodies lazily, and stuck out their tongues proudly at Wu Qi and the others. Without a choice, Wu Qi and the others could not afford to offend this group of big bosses. They could only lead their mounts down the main road, and take a detour to pass through this section of the main road. As they continued forward, Wu Qi's horizons were broadened. He saw many strange beasts and demons. In particular, there was an old turtle with a shell of over 30 feet in circumference. It had also formed a Yao core, and had gained sentience and intelligence. However, it foolishly mistook itself for a monkey. It shook its shell, and chased a group of monkeys climbing up and down a tree. The funny scene made Wu Qi speechless, while the armored soldiers who accompanied them were laughing in a deep voice. The captain turned his head and whispered to Wu Qi, "This old turtle is Old Mister's favorite pet. He has been following Old Mister since the founding of Great Yin Dynasty. But his brain was damaged when he was transcending the Thunder Tribulation. Therefore, his behavior is a little absurd. You will get used to it." "This turtle is Old Mister's pet? Who is Old Mister?" asked Wu Qi hastily. The captain answered naturally, "Oh, he is Old Mr. Mod, the founding patriarch of Mo sect. His Majesty, Chief General, and Deputy Prime Minister have all acknowledged him as their master. Therefore, we all address him as Old Mister. Old Mister likes nature. In this Mo forest, apart from this main road, no one is allowed to touch even a single blade of grass or tree. Therefore, the vegetation here is rich and beautiful, and there are many animals here. Just the number of demon immortals in Mo sect alone is at least several hundred." He pointed at the road where they came from, smiled bitterly and said, "Those few big bugs that blocked our way just now are the inner sect disciples of Mo sect. They are extremely spoiled by Old Mister, and they love to play with us. We can't afford to offend them, so we can only let them do whatever they want. Fortunately, Mo sect has a strict rule. Apart from playing with us, they have not done anything evil. Don't be fooled by their ferocious appearance, as they are actually herbivores." "Herbivores?" Wu Qi shook his head. Then he suddenly realized what he had just heard. Mod, the founding patriarch of Mo sect. But Wu Qi was puzzled. According to the records in the books that Lu Xiaobai had read, Mod should not have any relationship with Great Yin Dynasty. Why was he here in Great Yin Dynasty? And he was the teacher of Yan Dan, Jingke, and a few other people? Very soon, Wu Qi threw this question to the back of his mind. He had yet to figure out why Yan Dan, Jingke, and a few other people would appear in this world. So why would he care about the reason why Old Mr. Mod came here? Perhaps he had taken a liking to Yan Dan and Jingke, and that was the reason why he built Mo sect here. Along the way, figures of men gradually appeared on both sides of the main road. They were men clad in coarse linen clothes, their hair disheveled, and their feet bare. They were carrying iron axes and baskets, harvesting all kinds of mushrooms and wild vegetables in the woods, chopping down those dead trees and bundling them into bundles of firewood. Their clothes were simple and crude, and their bodies were skinny. But their faces were rosy, and an indescribable joyful expression could be seen on their faces. They were walking through the woods, yet it was as if they had blended into one with the woods. When they breathed, the woods breathed, and when they laughed, the woods laughed. Every single move they made was following the trajectory of some heaven and earth. The aura of nature made Wuqi's heart skip a beat. These men had different cultivation bases. The weakest one was an ordinary mortal, without any internal energy, while the strongest one was at the level of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. However, regardless of their cultivation base, they had blended into the woods naturally. This was something that even Wuqi, who had formed 2 Jin Dan in his water meridian, could not achieve. It sounded simple to say that one had to harmonize with nature, but one would know how difficult it was to actually do it. At least, when Wuqi met Nia Baihong and the other human immortals of Jin Dan realm, they were shrouded in surging strange signs, which made them completely incompatible with the nature. They were constantly being pushed and suppressed by the nature, so how could they ever harmonize with the nature? However, these men with low cultivation base had easily achieved this. When they saw Wuqi and his company passing by, these men, who came to the roadside with bundles of firewood, greeted them with a smile on their faces. One after another, the iron-armored soldiers cupped their fists and returned the greeting, not daring to show any arrogance. The captain said in a low voice, "They are the disciples of Mo sect. Don't be fooled by the fact that some of them have low cultivation base, as their abilities are not limited to martial strength. Any one of them who walks out from the Mo forest possesses the ability to increase the overall strength of an army by a few times. In fact, the few strongest armies of Great Yin Dynasty have their disciples from Mo sect providing them with advice and strategies." Wuqi nodded his head silently. This was what they meant by organization. Not only did old Mr. Mod know how to love with impartiality and not attack, he was also a famous educator and strategist. They walked along the main road for a long distance, and when the sun was setting in the west and the bright red sunlight shone upon the Mo forest, Wuqi finally came to a clearing in the heart of the Mo forest. Upon arriving at this place, Wuqi took a deep breath and stared blankly at an incredible building in front of him. The clearing in the forest was about 100 miles in circumference, and it included a few hills, a few small rivers and a small lake. Between the hills, rivers, and lakes, a large number of villages constructed from logs were scattered in a picturesque manner. Every single house fit perfectly with the surrounding environment, without any sense of awkwardness. Many disciples of Mo sect, clad in shabby clothes, were carrying out the last work of the day. Some had just walked out from the fields, some were climbing out from the river with baskets of fish in their hands, and some were carrying all kinds of tools, happily walking out from the surrounding woods. Amidst this natural and harmonious village, a purple flame pillar, several tens of feet in diameter, shot straight up into the sky from the ground. Hovering 1,000 feet above the ground, this earth core flame pillar, which contained an endless and frightening heat, was holding up a steel city, measuring several miles in circumference. On the smooth surface of the city, which was purely constructed from steel, countless huge runes could be vaguely seen, glinting with the same gleam as the purple flame pillar. This is... Wuqi was struck dumb. The city was not big, measuring several miles in circumference. In this world, it could only be considered as the smallest city, the size of a sesame seed or a mung bean. But as this city, measuring several miles in circumference, was entirely constructed from steel, the workload was simply too great. It was not a big deal if it was constructed from steel, as with the national strength of Great Yin Dynasty, it was a piece of cake to construct a city like this. But for it to hover 1,000 feet above the ground, according to the inheritance in Scroll of Stealing, only an immortal of at least Heaven Immortal realm could achieve this. Could it be that there was a Heaven Immortal in Mo sect? Tilting his head up and staring blankly at the city, Wuqi let his mount bring him towards the direction of the city. Chapter 129. Soon Wuqi and his companions arrived at the bottom of the steel city. When they were still about 1 mile away from the purple-red flame pillar, Wuqi could already feel a scorching heat coming right at his face, and a scorching smell came from his hair. The innate true fire energy in his fire meridians was activated, absorbing the heat from the surroundings and quickly transforming it into true fire energy, which flowed through his body. Instantly, he felt a cool sensation coming from his body. A rope ladder was hanging down from above, and the leader of the group grabbed the rope ladder and began climbing up step by step. Wuxia let out a clear cry and sprung up into the sky. With a few light kicks on the rope ladder with the tip of his feet, he had already climbed up to the Steel City. Down below, the soldiers hurriedly brought their impatient mounts and retreated into the distance. The heat from the underground fire was too strong, and it was not suitable for them to stay here for long. Only when they reached the top of the city did Wuxia get a clear view of the Steel City. The city was roughly circular, with a diameter of 3 miles. The huge disc-shaped base was about 1,000 feet thick, and the top of the city was a flat ground. All kinds of buildings were built here and there, and there were countless flower beds and bushes, hiding these buildings under the shade of greenery. However, the heat from the underground fire was too strong, and all the flowers and trees were fire elemental plants. Among them, there were many fire elemental spirit herbs, and they were all thousands of years old. There were already a few men in hemp garments waiting at the exit of the rope ladder. Seeing Wuxia quickly leaping up, a tall man with a simple and honest expression bowed to Wuxia and said with a deep voice, "Chief General has been waiting for a long time. Mr. Wuxia, please follow me." Before Wuxia could answer, the man smiled, turned and walked towards a tall tower made of pure metal in the center of the city. This tower was 1,080 feet tall, and according to the number of heavenly dipper and earthly evils, it was divided into 108 floors. The tower had 12 corners, which corresponded to the number of 12 yuan chens. There were a total of 3,650 bronze bells ringing in the wind, which also corresponded to the number of stars in the sky. Wuxia observed with his spirit eyes, and found that this tower was aimed right at the underground fire pillar right below the city. For this pillar of fire to be able to support such a city made of pure steel and midair, it could be seen that it contained absolute power. Such a huge amount of power was restrained within the tower, flowing rapidly along the countless array patterns within the tower. This tower was the core of this Steel City's array formation, and the powerful energy contained within it could be transformed into a terrifying attack at any time to kill the enemy. According to Wuxia's estimation, the underground fire energy contained in this tower was approximately equal to the total power possessed by 1,000 human immortals of Jindan. Such a large city was like a storage battery, with an enormous amount of underground fire energy stored in the tower as the core. Once all the energy was released at the same time, the instantaneous lethality was more than enough to kill an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Even celestial immortals who had formed their nascent divinities, low-level celestial immortals, could be severely wounded. This was an extremely powerful weapon of mass destruction. In fact, it was the prototype of a magic treasure. It was just that he didn't know who had the ability to borrow the flames from the Earth's core to create such a huge magic treasure. Looking at the tower, Wuxia could not help but feel his mouth watering, and could not help but keep swallowing a mouthful of saliva. The man brought Wuxia all the way to the bottom of the tower, and entered through a door that was carved with the painting of fishing, herding, farming, and forest in 4 seasons. The interior of the tower was completely empty, without any furnishings. The ground was inlaid with various metal alloy threads, and countless fire element energy stones were densely packed on top of it. There was no staircase in the tower, and there was only a round hole, about 10 feet in diameter, in the middle of the floor of each floor. A faint red light shone out from the bottom of the tower through the hole, shooting straight into all the floors above. Following the man into the faint red light, Wuxia felt his body lightened. He flew up along with the red light, and suddenly arrived at the highest floor of the tower. Clad in a black robe, Jingke was sitting in a corner of this floor, overlooking the beautiful scenery of the sunset through the window. 2 large wine jars were placed right next to him. While admiring the beautiful scenery, he scooped out some fine wine from a large white jade wine funnel, and poured it into his mouth. A strong smell of alcohol emanated from his body, and even the pores on his face were enlarged. It was unknown how much wine he had drunk, as his face had turned so red that it looked like blood was going to ooze out from it. In other places, Jingke was a man of great character who attracted the attention of many people. However, in this tower, there was a middle-aged man who sat in the center of an array in the south position. He was like a bright pearl or a beautiful jade, attracting the attention of all the people. Just by sitting there, Wuxia had no choice but to place all his attention on him. The middle-aged man had a delicate and handsome face, and a long beard grew on his chin. His facial features were not outstanding, but his eyes were extremely bright. They were tens of times brighter than the North Star that Wuxia saw on Earth, under the unpolluted night sky of the Sahara Desert. Although it was a pair of bright eyes, they did not give off any aggressive feeling. Instead, they were as clear as water. When Wuxia looked into his eyes, he felt his entire body relax, and he could not help but reveal a pleased smile. "Old Mr. MOD? Greetings from Wuxia." Looking at the man, Wuxia knew instinctively that he was MOD. His facial features were not outstanding, his stature was not tall or mighty, and he did not emanate any overbearing aura either. Even his dressing was similar to that of his disciples, barefooted, wearing a coarse linen shirt, and with a few strands of black soil under his fingernails. He looked no different from an old farmer in the countryside. But he was MOD, and Wuxia would never mistake him for someone else. For some unknown reason, MOD's image suddenly overlapped with the impression that Wu Wang gave to Wuxia. Both of them had a kind of warmth that made Wuxia feel at ease, safe, and comfortable, like the wings of a mother bird protecting a little bird in a stormy night. Wuxia felt his eyes turning sour, and 2 drops of tears suddenly rolled down his cheeks. With utmost respect, he dropped to his knees and gave MOD a few kowtows. Jingke gulped down a mouthful of wine from the white jade wine dipper, then turned to MOD and asked, "Teacher, what do you think of this little fellow?" MOD gazed deeply at Wuxia with his pair of bright eyes, then glanced at the 2 drops of tears rolling down Wuqia's cheeks. He nodded slowly and said, "He is a good boy." What a pitiful and good boy. Although he is a little cruel and merciless, he still has a pure and innocent heart. He is a good boy that I can rest assured about. MOD stretched his hand out, and gently lifted Wuxia up from the ground. MOD waved his hand and said with a smile, Come sit beside me." Wuxia wiped away his tears, walked to MOD with a solemn expression, and sat down on the empty ground beside him. Jingke seemed to be satisfied with MOD's answer. When MOD said that Wuxia was a good boy, the cold murderous intent in his eyes had vanished without a trace, and was replaced by a gentle look. He gave Wuxia a gentle look. It seemed like he had put down some thoughts in his mind. He grabbed the white jade wine dipper and poured a few cups of wine into the wine vat, then gulped them down happily. After that, he let out a loud burp. MOD sat quietly on the ground, with 3 pitch-black stone tablets hovering quietly in the air in front of him. He was performing some incantation gestures with both hands, and a ball of purple flame was burning ragingly in the air, crazily burning the 3 stone tablets. Dazzling golden gleams and purple mists kept bursting out from the stone tablets, and countless runes could be vaguely seen on them. From time to time, deep, muffled thunderclaps could be heard, shaking the entire pagoda. Wuxia recognized the origin of this purple flame. It was the acquired purple flame of Swan and I, purified from the primordial poisonous flame from the earth core that had existed for millions of years. It had the magical power to break all kinds of restrictive spells, and was the best choice for cultivators below the realm of heaven immortal to forcibly break all kinds of formations and restrictive spells. For example, if one found a box containing some treasures, but it was sealed with several dozens of restrictive spells, and without any spell or incantation gestures, the best and most direct choice was to use the acquired purple flame of Swan and I to break the restrictive spells with brute force. Judging from the way the 3 stone tablets were burned by the purple flame, the golden gleams and purple mists kept leaking out, and the thunderclaps kept ringing out, it was obvious that more than half of the restrictive spells in the stone tablets had been broken. Wuxia was very familiar with these 3 stone tablets, as he had been carrying them in the woods of Meng Mountains for nearly a month. They were the stone tablets that Yin Bugui and the others seized from the barbarians. No wonder after they arrived at Ji City, Yin Bugui never mentioned about the 3 stone tablets that Jingke had placed a bounty on. Apparently, they had been delivered to MOD, and he was using brute force to break the restrictive spells on them. Wuxia could not help but feel curious. What exactly was inside these stone tablets? MOD performed a few incantation gestures, and released them towards the ball of purple flame. After that, he turned to look at Wuqi with a smile and said, I've met many young men. You're a good boy, but you have too many worries in your heart. You need to relax in the future. I heard that your master was attacked and killed in Meng Mountains, and you were saved by someone there. Let bygones be bygones. Young man, you need to look forward. The world is a big place, and there are many wonderful things in it. Compared to us, you're still too young. Grudges should never be everything for a young man. Mod's words were not filled with any great principles. He talked leisurely with Wuqi, just like an uncle from next door. Strangely enough, Wuqi felt that the stagnant feeling in his heart, as well as the uneasiness and panic he felt after he came to this world, had completely vanished. His heart was filled with peace and tranquility. Just like that, he kept chatting with Mod until the moon hung high up in the sky. 36 consecutive claps of thunder were heard, as the 3 black stone tablets unleashed an endless stream of golden specks that drifted in all directions. Abruptly, the stone tablets broke apart, turning into several thousand jade slips that were as thin as cicadas' wings, 3 feet long and as wide as a thumb, hovering in the air. These jade slips were densely packed with runes the size of soybeans, and each of them was glinting with a magical and magnificent purple glow. Mod looked at these runes, smiled delightfully and said, All right, Yandan's reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives has been completed. Jingku, there are 3 chapters of the supreme white sun-piercing dragon technique, which you are cultivating, and you only lack the last chapter. With that, you can complete your cultivation technique. These are the sword techniques of earth element, the mountain crumbling sword technique, and the sky burning sword technique, which heaven-breaking sword sect lacks. Wonderful, the inheritance of heaven-breaking sword sect has been completed. Wuqi did not pay any attention to the cultivation techniques of the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives, and the supreme white sun-piercing dragon technique. Instead, he quickly glanced through the mountain-crumbling sword technique and the sky-burning sword technique, quickly memorizing the cultivation formula. There were 36 diagrams of cultivation routes in both sword techniques, and over 7,000 words of the cultivation formula. With the amazing innate ability of Lu Xiaobai, Wuqi easily branded the 2 sword techniques deeply into his mind. However, he found it strange that the cultivation technique cultivated by Yandan and Jingku, as well as the secret cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, would appear in the ancestral stone tablets secretly inherited by barbarians? Could it be that they were robbed by the ancestors of those barbarians? There was a great mystery in this matter, and he had to find out more about it. Before Wuqi could figure out the mystery, Mod's forehead was already covered in cold sweat. He nodded at Wuqi, smiled and said, Wuqi, if you're free, you should come here and take a look. You're a good kid. Jingku, bring these back to Ji City, and don't come to me again within 3 months. Jingku gave Mod a kowtow, then rolled up his sleeve and kept all the jade slips. After that, he called out to Wuqi, and both of them quickly left the tower. When they walked out from the tower, Wuqi turned his head and saw Mod standing on the top floor of the tower, nodding his head and smiling at him. Chapter 130. Taking a deep breath, Jingku shook his head and said, Therefore, the title of Marquis Tianyan has 2 reasons. Firstly, it's to thank you for enlightening us. Secondly, it's because of Princess Zhonglu. She can't really mix around with an unknown hanger-on. Although we don't take things like status and clans seriously, we are still us. We can't force so many people in Great Yan Dynasty to think the same way as us. A few wild beasts and insects were caught by Jingku when they were running a little slower, and were thrown several hundred feet away, smashing into towering trees and making them dizzy, unable to stand up for a long time. Suddenly, Wuqi realized that no matter it was these wild beasts, including the few great pythons who were about to transform into flood dragons, all of them were despicable wretches. Although they were being bullied by Jingku in such a violent manner, they were still bowing and flattering him. Looking at Jingku with surprise, Wuqi knitted his brows and said, Chief General, I Wuqi, have never done anything that goes against the heaven and reason. Is there a need for you to do this? Wei Xiaoxiao. Jingku's face darkened instantly. He sneered and nodded his head. That little girl? Hey, I don't like her. Wuqi nodded his head disapprovingly. Jingke was in control of Great Yin Dynasty's scouting office, and Lu Qingfeng had suddenly taken over the title of Duke of Yinlu and Zhuguozheng. If he didn't carefully investigate the background of Wuqi and Lu Qingfeng, this chief general of Great Yin Dynasty, he would be too incompetent. The measures taken in Little Meng City could fool the numerous secret agents of the Lu Kingdom, but they could never fool the men of scouting office. It was reasonable for Jing Ku and his men to know about Wu Qi's art of training soldiers. Seeing Wu Qi nod his head and agree to it, Jing Ku said, "We won't interfere in the matters between you and Princess Zhonglu, including His Majesty. But, you have to be careful of the Crown Prince. For the Crown Prince, Princess Zhonglu is not just a daughter." After a long period of silence, Jing Ku said, "Your technique of training soldiers is unique and ingenious. It is much better than the current strategy of Great Yin Dynasty. I suppose that master of yours is also a hermit, but too bad." Shaking his head, Jing Ke said, "You know how to train soldiers, and your skill in training them is so exquisite. This makes you worthy for us to take good care of you." Currently, the young masters and princes of Great Yin Dynasty were good at eating, drinking, playing, killing, visiting prostitutes, and so on. But if you want them to do something serious, there was no hope for them, and they were not reliable at all. Over 2,000 years, Great Yin Dynasty has been founded for over 2,000 years. Wu Qi was silent. He frowned. No wonder Yan Dan was so eager to give the Xiongqing brothers to him. However, even without Xiongqing and his brothers, would he, Wu Qi, be so easy to kill? Putting aside the fact that he had already formed the Jin Dan, before he formed the Jin Dan, no earth immortal of nascent soul realm would make a move. As long as he spared no cost and burned his blood essence to escape, no one would be able to stop him. Jing Ke had a strange expression on his face. He pondered for a while, then slowly said, "We've learned about what happened between you and Yin Chengfeng in Little Meng City. You've done a good job. Although your method is still immature and not experienced enough, the result is still satisfactory. Your technique of training soldiers is also very ingenious. I've made a copy of the technique of training soldiers in Little Meng City into a book, and I'm going to give it a try in a few new armies." Jing Ke stared at Wu Qi with a strange expression, nodded his head and said, "According to my temperament, since you've pointed out the biggest obstacle in our hearts, allowing us to make a breakthrough in our cultivation in just a few days, this merit is more than enough to reward you with 3 to 5 vassal kingdoms. But His Majesty is different. He has much more things to consider than me. He can't tell all the ministers and princes of Great Yin Dynasty that because of a single word of advice from you, he has rewarded you with many things." Shaking his head, Jing Ke stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "But who asked you to have an intimate relationship with that little girl Zhonglu? Tuoba Qingye, Tuoba Haofeng, and those young masters and princes, although they were close to Zhonglu in the past, in essence, Zhonglu is a Luanfeng that can fly up to the 9th heaven, while these young fellows are just a bunch of maggots on the ground. Although they are self-righteous, Zhonglu will never take a liking to this group of prodigal sons. Therefore, some people don't have to worry." Looking at the hesitation and puzzlement on Wu Qi's face, Jing Ke sneered and said, "Apart from protecting you, I gave Xiongqing and his men to you because I was afraid that those men who killed Yin Buji would strike Yin Qingfeng again. If they dare to strike again, with Xiongqing and his men by your side, they would be walking right into a trap. In the end, before all our precautions could come into play, you had already turned Sher Martial Club upside down, and even managed to catch the murderer, who tried to assassinate Yin Buji." With a subtle look, Wu Qi turned to look at Jing Ke. It seemed like his words had another meaning. He grabbed a huge wild boar that measured 26 feet and 7 feet long, then threw it nearly 1,000 feet away. With an indifferent expression, Jing Ke said, "Teacher has spoiled this group of wild beasts, making them only know how to fool around in the woods. You must be wondering why I specifically asked someone to come here this time." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath and cried out in shock. "That man is the personal guard of Wei Xiaoxiao from Wei Merchant. Could it be that the power of Wei Merchant has infiltrated into the Court of Justice and Criminal and Scouting Office? Indeed, money can make the world go round." Although Wu Qi's expression was one of extreme shock, he was laughing wildly in his mind. Who told you that Wei Xiaoxiao is so arrogant and domineering? Today, I'll make you suffer a heavy punishment even if you don't die. Sighing lightly, Jing Ke nodded his head and said, Teacher has a deep understanding of the human heart and knows the ways of the world. He can easily tell whether a man's heart is good or evil. If he said that you're a good man, then you can't be any bad. If Teacher said that you have an evil thought in your heart and are not a righteous man, it would be impossible for you to leave Mo Lin alive. Jing Ke snorted lightly and continued, This is also the reason why I gave Xiongqing and his brothers to you. Zhang Lu is involved in too many things, but she herself has no idea about it. But don't tell me we don't know about it? With your background, and the fact that you don't have any powerful backer, the closer you get to Zhang Lu, the tighter the noose around your neck will be. If you don't take some precautions beforehand, you won't be able to survive for more than 3 months in Ji City. Wu Qi quickly cupped his fist and expressed his gratitude to Jing Ke, thanking him for his concern and great kindness. At the same time, he was surprised by Jing Ke's well-informed eyes and ears. After the incident with Sher Martial Club, he immediately rushed back to Swordsmanship Mansion and reported the news to Lu Chengfeng. As a result, he didn't waste much time during the journey. However, right after he had a brief conversation with Lu Chengfeng, the incident with Sher Martial Club happened. Immediately, the men sent by Jing Ke arrived at Swordsmanship Mansion. The efficiency was simply amazing. Jing Ke twitched his lips, sneered and said, What kind of crimes are you talking about? Why would I care about that? Whether you kill someone, set a fire, or even slaughter someone on the streets in Ji City, I don't care about all these trivial things. When Jing Ke was still a wandering knight, he had done many of these things as well. I've never taken any of those crimes into my heart. All of a sudden, Jing Ke snapped at Wu Qi with a stern voice. So the incident with Sher Martial Club, was it your intention, or was it just a coincidence? Jing Ke's face darkened. Rolling his eyes, he glared at Wu Qi and said, This great Yan dynasty is built by us, one tile at a time. Don't be so harsh with your words. He paused for a brief moment, then continued with a cold voice. His Majesty is stabilizing his cultivation base, and Gao Jianli and a few other men are busy with important matters, so they can't be separated from him. I know you're involved in this incident. Since you've sent some men of sacrifice to silence the witness, and you're the one who captured that man alive, there might be someone who wants to kill you. That's why I've sent someone to summon you to Mo Lin today. Firstly, it's to save your little life, and secondly, it's to let Teacher know what kind of person you are. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment. Apart from the incident with Sher Martial Club, there was nothing else that he had stirred up today. While Wu Qi was immersed in various thoughts, Jing Ke continued, speaking in a slow voice. You have to be extra careful when you go out these few days. Ask Xiongqing and the others to follow you closely. If you meet the guard who was silenced, be careful that someone might kill you to vent their anger. Jing Ke raised his head up and looked at the bright moon in the sky, then said with a low voice, Teacher is a scholar who possesses a bright Tao heart, and has reached the realm of deity. Unlike us, Teacher has a heart that is open and frank, like a clear mirror and glazed glass, without any worries or worries. Therefore 1,500 years ago, he had already formed his nascent soul, and now his cultivation base has reached the acme of perfection. Perhaps, it won't take him too many years to form his nascent soul, and become a deity, truly living a long and unfettered life. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi shook his head and did not say anything. Wu Qi understood what Jing Ke was trying to say. Those who occupy a high position will have different thoughts and thoughts from ordinary people. I can understand why all of you are doing this. Twitching his lips, Jing Ke pulled out a 3 feet tall yellow wine gourd out of nowhere, opened the stopper and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of the fine wine. He breathed out a breath that reeked of wine, threw his head back, laughed and said, Prince Dan Ugh, that is His Majesty. He knew that Zhang Lu has been very close to you these days, and the closeness is very different from the closeness he had with those young masters and princes. Therefore His Majesty found an excuse and conferred you the title of Marquis Tianyun. Wu Qi nodded his head and said, It has been over 2,000 years, and it's time for everything to rot. Hastily, Wu Qi shut his mouth. Only then did Jing Ke continue. Because he has been paying so much attention to you. That's why all these things happened. Today, I wanted to let teacher know what kind of person you are, and it was just a precautionary measure. Now that you are a good man, we can put our minds at ease. Since you are harboring evil intentions, we'll kill you as soon as possible, and that will put our minds at ease. The commotion you've caused today is a little too big. The moon hung high up in the sky, and countless fireflies were flying and dancing in the dark forest. Amidst the watery moonlight, the fireflies were dancing in the air, making the scene look like a dreamy land. A faint watery mist was shuttling back and forth in the forest. Apart from the sound of wind blowing through the dense forest, no other sound could be heard. It was different from when Wuxia came here. When he came here, those ferocious beasts and gigantic insects were blocking his way complacently, making him look bad. But when he returned to the city, those big fellows would turn and run away as fast as they could whenever they saw Jingke. Jingke breathed out a long sigh, sneered and said, "What exactly is the identity of the man you personally captured?" He actually killed several dozens of men from criminal and justice court and scouting office on the spot to silence him. After a careful analysis, we found out that the main target they wanted to silence was the man you killed. Jingke told Wuxia everything that happened in Martial Club in full detail. The main point was that all those men of sacrifice were from criminal and justice court and scouting office, and not some outsiders in disguise. When Jingke asked the question, a threat of evil force that could shake one's heart and soul burst out from his body. Wuxia felt his spirit was shaken, and he nearly told the truth. After pondering for a while, Wuxia nodded his head and said, "His Majesty's kindness, Wuxia understands." But Wuxia doesn't understand why His Majesty would treat Wuxia in such a way. Wuxia didn't believe that he was the kind of man who was loved by everyone. Why would Yan Dan, the mighty emperor of Great Yan Dynasty, suddenly fall in love with him? Was it just because of the relationship between Princess Zhanglu? For the emperor, no matter how much a princess favored someone, there was no reason for her to send so many demon Jin Dan bears as his personal guards to Wuxia. Wuxia nodded his head. He knew what Jingke was trying to say. Is His Majesty thinking that if Wuxia were to hang out with Princess Zhanglu, and he was just a hanger-on of Duke Yanlu, it would be bad for his reputation? Therefore, he conferred the title of Marquis to Wuxia? Chapter 131. Jingke's loud shout contained a very strange ripple of energy, which vaguely carried the shadow of the mystifying technique from the Fiend Dao. While Wuxia was pondering over what Jingke had told him just now, the sudden shout from Jingke had caused his soul to tremble, and nearly told him everything he had seen and heard in Prince Ren's mansion. However, he had made some achievements in cultivating the source of Earth Chapter, Wood Chapter, and Fire Chapter. Ever since he started cultivating these three cultivation techniques, in his spiritual sea, apart from the 10,000 zhang water ripples he had obtained from cultivating the water chapter, there was also a dense earth chi, a dense forest, and a 10,000 zhang sea of flames that appeared out of nowhere. Above this earth energy, jungle, flame ocean, and water ripple was the divine flame of order, which was imprisoned by many restrictive talismans. Currently, Wuxia could not absorb the divine flame of order and make it his own. But it was, after all, one of the few divine flames in the universe. Right after Jingke's shout, which carried the shadow of the Fiend Dao, touched Wuqia's soul, the divine flame of order immediately unleashed a large sheet of green-purple light, easily dispelling Jingke's devilish voice and stabilizing Wuqia's soul. The energies of earth energy, jungle, flame ocean, and water ripple rolled and rocked violently, transforming into a four-colored whirlpool in Wuqia's spiritual ocean, firmly protecting his soul in its core. With just a slight tremble of his soul, Wuqia's mind was completely sober. However, he still put on an expression as if his soul had flown out of his body, staring blankly at Jingke. Countless thoughts flashed across his mind. Should he tell Jingke about Lao Ai or not? If he told him, perhaps he would immediately suffer the counterattack from the forces of Prince Ren's mansion. If he didn't tell him, would he just watch Lao Ai, a peerless evil man, hide in Prince Ren's mansion? Because of the relationship with Princess Ying Chuan, Lao Ai had already noticed Wuqia and Lu Chengfeng, who knew what he would do behind their backs. Compared to Lao Ai, who had a bad reputation, the reputation of Jing Ku, Gao Jianli and Yan Dan seemed to be much better. At least, until now they still treated Wu Qi and his companions kindly, without any malicious intent. So what if Prince Ren's residents retaliated? When Wu Qi thought of the large amount of spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained from Sher Martial Club, he was immediately filled with endless confidence. Give him some time, and he won't be afraid of anyone. As long as Wu Qi used these spatial breaching spirit gold to set up a few escape routes, he would not have to fear anyone in this world anymore. In just a blink of an eye, with a dull expression on his face, Wu Qi confessed to Jing Ku what he had seen and heard in the mansion of Prince Ren. He even took the initiative to admit to Jing Ku that he had a very high talent in the art of formations. Since Lu Qingfeng obtained the script of heaven-patching formation from heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect, he had studied it with Lu Qingfeng for a period of time, and the result was that he had learned a lot from it. That was how he bypassed the defensive formation in the Prince Ren's mansion. When he suddenly heard the two words Swanni, Jing Ku's body shuddered, and he almost leaped up from his mount. He fixed his eyes on Wu Qi and snapped. "Are you sure you heard it right? Was it really Zhenjin? Did he really use that guy to carry a wheel made of pure gold and spin it around? Prince Ren Yin Xianchen is actually his disciple? And Princess Yingchuan has an affair with him as well? It's because you don't want to owe Princess Yingchuan a favor. That's why you attacked Sher Martial Club in advance?" Wu Qi nodded his head blankly and said, "My young master's mother clan wants to divide a territory in the Lu Kingdom. If we end up owing Princess Yingchuan a favor, it will not be a good thing." After a brief pause, Wu Qi confessed to Jing Ku in a very honest manner. "I didn't know it before, but now Wu Qi suddenly realized that if one wants to cultivate, he can't do it without money. A lower-grade magical item with the lowest quality would cost 100 gold coins, middle-grade magical item would cost several thousand gold coins, an upper-grade magical item could easily cost 100,000 gold coins. All kinds of talismans are even more expensive. Without money, how can one achieve success in cultivating? Forming my Jin Dan nascent soul, becoming a witness immortal and earth immortal, Wu Qi also wants to live a free and unfettered life." Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi said without any reservation, "For the sake of cultivating, Little Meng City is my young master's private territory. Not to mention the fact that the annual production of Little Meng City is only enough for Wu Qi and my young master. Only Wu Qi and my young master can satisfy our needs. However, if we want to live in Ji City, we need to keep a great number of mighty guards in our mansion, and all of that will cost us money. Therefore, we're planning to cultivate the Tai clan of Marquis Yuanyang, allowing him to establish a kingdom of his own. With the production of a kingdom as our backing, together with the production of 2 provinces owned by my young master, it will be barely enough." Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "The 9th clan has a large number of people, but the only useful ones are Yen Jiuhui and Yen Bugui, with only a few hundred of them. The rest are just a bunch of idiots who only know how to eat and drink. In order to keep so many members of the imperial clan, they have spent more than half of the production of 2 provinces. If we don't find another source of income, how are we going to establish a foothold in Ji City?" Jing Ke gave Wu Qi a glare grumpily, reached out his hand and lightly patted on Wu Qi's chin, then cried out in a low voice, "Enough! Wake up now! Humph, how dare you, little brat! How dare you hide such an important matter from me? In order to not owe anyone a favor, you've created such a big mess. That's Lao Ai." While Jing Ke was cursing, Wu Qi suddenly woke up. With a terrified expression, he stared at Jing Ke and asked, "Chief General, what happened to me just now?" Jing Ke rolled his eyes, stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "You were possessed by a ghost just now. Humph. You've done a great service this time, but you don't need to know why it's a great service. Lao Ai, you fake eunuch. Don't tell me you've been hiding in Great Yen for so many years? Damn you, why didn't we find you? Why didn't you argue with that godson of yours? Why are you hiding in Great Yen Dynasty?" Laughing dryly, Wu Qi carefully asked, "Chief General, that Lao Ai, who exactly is he?" Jing Ke's face twitched a few times. Frowning, he waved his hand forcefully and said, "You don't have to know who he is. It's a very complicated matter. If I have to explain it from 2,000 years ago, it won't be clear in a short period of time. In short, you have to avoid Prince Ren's mansion for the next few days. Don't offend Prince Ren's mansion and the people around him. As for the incident of Sher Martial Club, we'll use the excuse you made up. Tell them that Yen Chengfeng has taken a fancy to Sher Martial Club and purposely tried to seize its foundation. Jing Ke sneered, shook his head and said, "This is a little unpleasant to hear. A duke is trying to seize the foundation of a martial club. Hee, but now, all the juniors are doing the same thing. It's not a big deal for your Duke Yanli's mansion to run amok. It doesn't matter if you have a bad reputation. Among all the juniors in Great Yin Dynasty, none of them have a good reputation." Patting hard on Wuqi's shoulder, Jing Ke said frankly, "Don't blame me for asking you with a devilish technique. Although you, a little boy, don't know about this, it is too important. Hey Lao Ai, what a great Lao Ai. Even the scouting office and Gao Jianli's swallows couldn't find any clues, but you Lao Ai have actually found some clues. You are indeed the Marquis of Chong Xian. What a great Marquis of Chong Xian. What a great Lao Ai." While sighing with emotions, Jing Ke had brought Wuqi to the outskirts of Ji City. At the moment, all 4 cities of Ji City were tightly locked, and all the city gates were tightly sealed. However, with Jing Ke's order, all the city gates were opened. From the outermost city gate all the way to the inner city, all the gates along the way were opened one after another. A great number of city guards came out to greet and guard, escorting Wuqi all the way back to Duke Yanli's mansion. When the procession stopped outside of Duke Yanli's mansion, they happened to see 2 small green coaches parked in a small alley opposite the entrance of the mansion. Jing Ke had a pair of sharp eyes, and he saw the 2 coaches. He casually flicked his whip at Wuqi and murmured under his breath, "Report to me tomorrow. Who would pay a visit to Duke Yanli's mansion in the middle of the night? Remember my words, be more cautious when you travel these days, and be more cautious when you speak. Don't mention anything about Lao Ai to anyone. And no matter what rumors you hear, just pretend you didn't hear anything." Escorted by Jing Ke, the group of city guards walked towards the general's mansion in the inner city. Wuqi watched the procession disappear after turning a corner, and only then did he hastily walk into Duke Yanli's mansion. He walked along the tunnel and came to the parlor, which was used by Lu Chengfeng only when he received the honorable guests. He saw Yan Fu Laohe, and a few others were waiting on the outside with a solemn expression, while serving servants were carrying plates of fruits, tea, and snacks into the parlor. Upon seeing Wuqi come in, Laohe quickly came up to him with an excited expression. He lowered his voice, and with an unconcealable excitement he laughed and said, "Mr. Wuqi, you're finally back. Go in and have a look, an honorable guest has arrived. The benefactor of young master is here. He has just arrived for a while, and young master has just invited him in. This old mister is young master's great benefactor. Mr. Wuqi, you have to treat him with great care." Lu Qingfeng's great benefactor? Wuqi was struck dumb. Since when did Lu Qingfeng have any great benefactor? This guy grew up in the Lu family of Liang, and when he reached the age where he should take over part of the family business, and when he was strong enough to pose a threat to the real disciples of the Lu family, Lu Tsuhai, he was kicked away to Little Meng City and left to fend for himself. Who was the benefactor to him? In those years, Lu Chengfeng was just an illegitimate son who was not welcomed by the Lu family. Flicking away the dust from his clothes, Wuqi put on a smile and strode into the parlor. The parlor was brightly lit, and the supreme grade wax made from the oil of merman shone brightly. A fragrant aroma came wafting into Wuqi's face, making his clothes wet by the dew from Mo Lin feel very comfortable. Inside the parlor, Lu Chengfeng was serving tea to an old man with a smile on his face. The old man was sitting on the seat of honor, receiving the tea served by Lu Chengfeng with a big smile on his face. At the same time, he kept saying that he didn't dare, grabbed Lu Chengfeng's arm and asked him to sit down. This old man was wearing a long robe made of green silk. His skin was whiter than snow, and his face was as white as silver. His round face looked rich and generous, and the 3 strands of silver beard under his chin exuded a sense of vigor and elegance. This old man didn't wear many ornaments. He only had 2 dragon-shaped jade pendants hanging on his left and right side, and a silver ring on the middle finger of his left hand. On the surface of the ring were 2 masks of the same size, and 2 big twisted mouths were smiling brightly. He was from the Wei family. Obviously, the mask was the emblem of Wei merchant. Wuqi gave the old man a deep look, cupped his fist and bowed at Lu Chengfeng. "Young master, Wuqi is back." Lu Chengfeng was delighted. Without hesitation, he turned to Wuqi and said, "You're back? Quick, come and greet old Mr. Wei. He is the current clan leader of Wei merchant, and the grandfather of young Miss Wei Xiaoxiao. The reason why he came here today is to give an explanation to Sher Martial Club. I never expected that old Mr. Wei is the benefactor who gave Chengfeng the mystic technique of cultivation, and a large sum of money." Wuqi was struck dumb. Before Lu Chengfeng went to Little Meng City, he had been studying the Tao of formation. With his cultivation of peak stage Hotian realm, he was able to control a formation constructed by 3 formation pillars. This proved that he had an extraordinary cultivation in the Tao of formation. At that time, Wuqi found it strange. Perhaps the cultivation technique he was using was a secret technique of Lu family, but the Tao of formation was a technique that only cultivators would know. As a bastard son of Lu family, where did he get it from? Especially the lower-tier magical treasure used by Lu Chengfeng, the little 25th lamp. It was not until after he left Ji City that Wuqi found out the market price of lower-tier magical treasures from the market of 4 seas. The price of upper-tier magical treasures in the market was over 100,000 gold coins, and the price of lower-tier magical treasures was even more immeasurable. After all, even Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, who were both human immortals of Jindan, had only used lower-tier magical treasures. Wuqi had long felt that the origin of the little 25th lamp used by Lu Chengfeng was a little strange, and it made him realize that he had such a great benefactor in the past. The so-called large sum of money, how much did this old man of Wei merchant give Lu Chengfeng in those years? With all kinds of thoughts flashing in his mind, Wuqi took a slow step forward and greeted this old man meticulously. Chapter 132. The old man from Wei clan gave Wuqi a glance smilingly, then used his right hand to touch his left wrist and took off a bracelet, which was 6 fingers wide and had a purple-blue hue, with a color as deep as a bottomless abyss. He handed the bracelet over to Wuqi, smiled and said, "You are also a young hero. I heard that little friend Wuqi has joined Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. Since you are a cultivator, this storage bracelet is more useful in the hands of little friend Wuqi than in mine." Wuqi stared at the bracelet that was placed 3 feet in front of him. The bracelet was glinting brilliantly, and countless starlight could be seen swirling on its deep surface. Clouds and wind could be seen flying at top speed. In the depths of the bracelet, there were some indistinct red blood threads that formed a series of magical runes. Wuqi could recognize these runes. They were all mentioned in Scroll of Stealing, the Sumeru Mustard immortal talismans that could only be found in upper-grade magical storage items. Looking at the smiling expression on the old man's face, Wuqi narrowed his eyes and said, "Wuqi dares not accept this gift. I dare not accept it." The old man stared at Wuqi with surprise. He shook his head and said, "Little friend Wuqi, haven't you heard of the saying that one dares not reject a gift from an elder? When I first saw you, little friend Wuqi, I found you to be a man I like. Therefore, I'm just giving you a small gift as a meeting gift. What is there to be ashamed of? Wei clan has been operating in Great Yin Dynasty for a long time, and this is just a storage magical item. It's nothing to me." Lu Chengfeng looked at Wuqi, smiled and said, "Wuqi, since it is old Mr. Wei's kind intention, just accept it. Old Mr. Wei has done me a great favor, and he is truly my benefactor, as well as our elder. This is just a storage magical item. Just accept it." Wuqi shook his head, bowed respectfully to the old man, and slowly took 3 steps back. He stared at the old man and said in an indifferent tone, "The reason why Wuqi refuses to accept old Mr.'s gift is not only because I feel ashamed of it, but also because I don't want to owe old Mr. a favor. For someone like you, it is too difficult to return a favor." Lu Chengfeng's expression changed slightly, while the old man straightened his back and looked at Wuqi with an interested expression. Why do you say that? Wuxia gave the old man a deep look, smiled and said, May I ask, old mister, what is the purpose of your visit? Is it just to reminisce with our young master? If old mister wants to reminisce about the old days, as our young master has been staying in G City for quite some time, you should have come to visit him earlier, don't you think so? Lu Qingfeng sat down slowly on the seat, looking at the old man with a smile on his face. The old man sighed lightly. He weighed the storage bracelet in his hand, shook his head and said, What a cunning lad! I've been a merchant all my life, and this is the first time in my life that I failed to deliver a treasure to someone. TSK, you're giving a treasure to someone, but you're actually not willing to accept it. You brat, you brat. The old man looked at Wuxia with a slightly disappointed expression, breathed out a long sigh and said, Fortunately, there are very few people like you in the world. Otherwise, my way merchant. Ha ha ha. He gave 3 loud laughs, then casually threw the bangle out of the parlor. A loud splashing noise was heard, as the bangle was thrown into some stream or river outside the parlor. The old man laughed and said, Forget it. Since you don't like my gift, this bracelet is useless. I can only throw it away. I can only throw it away. Lu Qingfeng cupped his fist, bowed slightly to the old man and said, Wuqia's words were inappropriate. I hope old mister won't take offense. The old man shook his head and said, No, how could I blame him? Speaking of which, little friend Wuxia has hit the nail on the head. Indeed, I'm not here to talk about the old days with Duke Yanlu. The old man put on a solemn expression and said with a deep voice, I'm a merchant, and the duty of a merchant is to hoard and seek great profits. Many years ago, Duke Yanlu was bullied and humiliated by a few brothers from Lu clan of Liang, and he suffered a fate worse than death. I was fortunate enough to witness it, and thus, I gave Duke Yanlu the beginner cultivation technique, the secret of formation, and 1 million gold ingots. Wuxia sucked in a cold breath. This old man was really generous. How could he spend so much money on a poor illegitimate son like Lu Qingfeng? The Qi refinement mantra and array formation mysteries were priceless secret manuals, but to be honest, the value of these secret manuals was only the cost of the manual labor and the cost of paper and ink. But 1 million gold ingots, 1 million gold ingots. To spend so much money on an illegitimate son. This old man was not only bold, he was simply insane. Could it be that he already knew the secret that Lu Qingfeng was the illegitimate son of Yan Buji at that time? Or, could it be that he already knew Lu Qingfeng's future achievement at that time? 1 million gold ingots. Without even asking, the origin of that lower-tier magical treasure of Lu Qingfeng, the little lamp of third, could be easily found out. What couldn't one buy with money? No wonder Lu Qingfeng was so poor when he went to Little Meng City. He had simply used all his wealth to buy a lower-tier magical treasure. Once again, Lu Qingfeng cupped his fist and bowed to the old man. He sat up straight, bowed slightly and said, Old mister's kindness is like giving Qingfeng a new life. Qingfeng will never forget it for the rest of his life. Straightening his body, Lu Qingfeng stared at the old man and said with a deep voice, No matter what request old mister has, as long as Qingfeng can do it, I'll do it without any hesitation. Old mister, what do you want from me? Just tell me. This guy had sold him out with just a few words. Wuxia frowned and gave Lu Qingfeng a look, then breathed out a sigh. It was a good thing, as this was the weakness of Lu Qingfeng's character. But, at least it was better than those guys who would turn their backs on him. In the future, Wuxia would devote himself to the path of cultivation. He would need endless money, energy stones, and pills to support his cultivation, and Lu Qingfeng would be his biggest source of income. An affectionate and loyal brother is always better than a heartless and ungrateful partner. Wuxia breathed out another sigh, then he walked to a table next to Lu Qingfeng and sat down. A few serving ladies walked over quietly and served him tea, fruits, and snacks. Wuxia picked up the teacup and sniffed the aroma of the tea with an indifferent expression. After that, he took a sip of the tea and put down the teacup, then turned to look at the old man. Quietly, he stared at the old man. He felt that a light was about to burst out from his mind, yet he couldn't grasp it no matter how hard he tried. This was a feeling that came from the strong intuition left to him by Lu Xiaobai, and it had nothing to do with Wuxia himself. Instinct told Wuxia that he should be able to guess the identity of this old man. But, no matter how hard he racked his brain, he just couldn't figure out who this old man was. The old man looked at Lu Chengfeng with a satisfied expression. He lightly knocked on the table and said, "Let me put it this way. Many years ago when I helped Duke Yanlu, it was an investment. An investment needs a return. Now, I need the exclusive management rights of all metal and energy stone mines in Duke Yanli's territory. I'll give you the income that Duke Yanli should have, but all the mines must be monopolized by Wei Merchant." Before Lu Chengfeng could say anything, Wuxia had already said with an anxious voice, "We can give you the metal mines but not the energy stone mines. Our young master and Wuxia have both joined Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and these energy stone mines are now under the sole management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect." After a brief moment of pondering, the old man turned to look at Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng nodded his head and said with a deep voice, "That's right. Currently, all the energy stone mines in Chengfeng's territory are under the management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and all the energy stones will belong to Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, for their disciples to use in their cultivation." The old man sighed, shook his head and said, "I'm a little late. Competing with Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect? I'm not that crazy." "Well, forget about the energy stone mines, but those metal mines will be under the sole management of Wei Merchant. What do you think, Duke Yanlu? Consider it as a return of my favor, Duke Yanlu." Wuxia praised in his mind. This old man Wei was indeed a great merchant with many years of experience. Just a moment ago, he was still talking about the favor, but now he had immediately laid out his price and discussed the deal. Even ghosts knew that if Wei Merchant monopolized all the metal mines in Lu Chengfeng's territory, the profits he could get would be tremendous. This old man's appetite was much bigger than Wei Xiaoxiao's. Wei Xiaoxiao only wanted a few iron mines in Lu Chengfeng's territory, but this old man wanted to swallow all the metal mines in Lu Chengfeng's territory. Staring at the silver-haired and silver-bearded old man, Lu Chengfeng clenched his jaws, nodded his head and said, "Old mister, Chengfeng is indebted to you. Whatever you want, Chengfeng will agree to. However, there are many mines in Chengfeng's territory, and they are related to the expenditure of several thousand members of the 9th clan of Yan clan." The old man stroked his beard, smiled and said, "Of course. How much is the annual output of all the mines in Duke Yanli's territory? I'll pay Duke Yanlu an extra 30% of the profit, based on the average output of the past 10 years. The old man let out 3 loud laughs, then turned to look at Lu Chengfeng and said, "Now that we've finished talking about the serious matters, I have a small request. Wei Xiaoxiao is my good-for-nothing granddaughter. When I first asked her to take charge of all the affairs of the merchant in G City, she had already made a big mistake." The old man sighed lightly, then looked at Lu Chengfeng and said slowly, "I hope Duke Yanlu can forgive Xiaoxiao if she has offended you in any way. Also, the man who was captured in Sher Martial Club is just a guard hired by Xiaoxiao. He has nothing to do with the death of Duke Yanlu Duke Buji." Lu Chengfeng frowned and didn't say anything. He turned to look at Wuxia, and vaguely, a trace of uneasiness and hesitation could be seen in his eyes. Wuxia stared at the old man and asked with a deep voice, "The one who killed Xiaoxiao is someone from Wei clan?" The old man answered with a deep voice, "Yes. It was this old man who personally gave the order to kill that guard and destroy his face. If the people of Scouting Office and Swallow were to know that Xiaoxiao's guard appeared in Sher Martial Club and colluded with Sher Tianma to assassinate Duke Buji, our Wei clan would never be able to clear our name. In order to avoid all these troubles, I had no choice but to kill him. I'll get rid of all the suspicion, and only after that will I come here to ask for a favor from Duke Yanlu." Lu Chengfeng pondered for a brief moment, then turned to look at Wuxia. Sighing lightly, Wuxia raised his right palm up into the air and said, "I swear on the lives and souls of Wuqia's fellow apprentices, Wuxia will never reveal anything that happened in Sher Martial Club to anyone. Everything is just a coincidence. As for the guard, it was because he was trying to flee, and Wuxia wanted to capture him alive to show his might. In short, it is impossible for Miss Wei Xiaoxiao to have any relationship with Sher Martial Club." The old man stared at Wuxia with surprise and said, "This is a strange oath. Little friend Wuqia's sect?" Wuxia sighed and said, Since young, Wuxia was brought up by my master. To Wuxia, my master is like a father or a mother. If Wuxia does not abide by the oath today, I'll make my master Wuxia's master, and all my fellow apprentices have their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. 2 drops of tears gently rolled down from Wuxia's cheeks. Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai had their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. Hearing such a vicious oath, the old man felt relieved immediately. A sorrowful expression was seen on his face, as he slowly comforted Wuxia. After a few drops of tears, Wuxia wiped them dry, smiled and asked the old man, "Not only that, what is old Mister's name?" The old man laughed and said, "I'm Wei Sanju, and I call myself Old Man Yangdi. Little friend, you can just call this old man Wei Yangdi." Suddenly Wei Sanju, Yangdi So, and Wuxia threw their gazes over at the ring on the old man's finger. Suddenly, a thought exploded in his mind. He could roughly guess the identity of this old man. When Lu Chengfeng was still a young man, he had the courage to invest millions of gold coins. Apart from him, who else could it be? Chapter 133. Because of the presence of Wuxia, the atmosphere in the parlor had become rather strange. Although Wei Sanju was a shrewd old man with a thick face, he was not used to this awkward atmosphere. After chatting with Lu Chengfeng for a short while, he rose and bid his farewell. Lu Chengfeng dared not to show any neglect. Without hesitation, he summoned Yan Fu, Lao He and all his family members, lining up and sending him off from Duke Yanli's mansion. From a small alley on the opposite side of the street, 2 coaches drove out at top speed. Wei Sanju, with a face full of smiles, boarded the coach, poked his head out from the window, and waved his hand at Lu Chengfeng in a friendly manner. He said loudly, "Duke Yanlu, please don't send me off too far. If that's the case, I'll send someone to take over after a few days. I hope Duke Yanlu can inform me in advance." Lu Chengfeng bowed deeply, his palms nearly touching the ground. He said passionately, "Since old Mister has given his order, Chengfeng will obey it. Rest assured, old Mister, there will be no mistake in this matter." 2 lanterns hanging on the shaft of both coaches were lit up. The unique badge of Wei Merchant with a laughing face looked very eye-catching in the dim light of the night. The coaches left slowly, and a team of patrolling soldiers happened to pass by. When they saw the 2 coaches, they didn't show any reaction and just let them pass by. Curfew had been enforced in G City, and obviously, Wei Sanju's coaches had violated the curfew. However, the badge of Wei Merchant had a unique effect, as it could make these soldiers give them a way out. Money makes the world go round. Looking at this, Wuxia couldn't help but shake his head. Since both the Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office had their own spies from Wei Merchant, why couldn't the city guards have their own? Perhaps all the soldiers in the city guards of G City had been fed by Wei Merchant. Lu Chengfeng looked at the coach that Wei Sanju had left, took a deep breath and said, "He is, after all, my great benefactor. Although there might be some suspicion of demanding a favor, a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. I'm not a gentleman, but I can't be an ungrateful villain. Wuxia, this matter ends here." Glancing at Lu Chengfeng, Wuxia nodded helplessly. "Should I just let this matter go?" Lu Chengfeng makes it sound easy. With this old man's background and the fact that he had spent a lot of money to nurture this rare commodity, it wouldn't be so easy for you to end your relationship with him just like that. His surname was Wei, and he used those smiling faces as the insignia of the Merchant Guild. When the 2 mouths were placed side by side, not only could they be placed side by side, but they could also be superimposed downwards. That was the character Lu. Yangdi So, what a Yangdi South. A businessman who was born in Yangdi, had the surname Lu, and liked to invest heavily in advance. Who else could it be other than Lu Buwei, who had almost single-handedly established the foundation of the Daqin dynasty? Lao Ai had been hiding in Great Yin dynasty for over 2,000 years. Why couldn't he, Lu Buwei, change his appearance and build his own business in Great Yin dynasty? Judging from what happened in Sher Martial Club, the foundation of Lu Buwei in Great Yin dynasty was not necessarily weaker than Lao Ai's. After staring blankly at Lu Buwei's coach that was disappearing into the distance for a while, Wuxia spun and returned to Duke Yanli's mansion. He cried out loudly, Xiaobai, ask a few brothers to help me go to the parlor and fish out the bracelet that old man Wei threw out. TSK, he was the one who threw away the bracelet, not me Wuqi, who accepted his gift. At most, I can be considered as retrieving the trash. I don't owe him a favor. Quick, fish it out now. Listening to Wuqi's shameless words, Lu Qingfeng and the others had their faces turned black and white. However, Wuqi didn't care what they were thinking. He asked Meng Xiaobai to bring some men to the few streams and rivers outside the parlor to fish out the bracelet, while he told them that he was going to do some homework for the night, circulating his energy and regulating his breath. After that, he hastily returned to his abode, shut the door tightly, and with a twist of his body, he was shrouded by a thread of earth energy and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had gone a few miles away. Carefully following the direction where Lu Buwei had gone, Wuqi used the earth element to move for a few miles. Noiselessly, he came to the bottom of Lu Buwei's coach. The speed of the coach was not fast, about the same as an ordinary man walking. Wuqi came out from the ground with ease, and without making any noise, he stuck himself to the bottom of the coach. Apart from the sound of the wheels rubbing against the ground, the only thing Wuqi could hear was the footsteps of the soldiers of the city defense army, who kept passing by from a distance. The two coaches belonging to Lu Buwei looked ordinary, as they were pieced together with wooden planks and painted with a layer of varnish. However, when Wuqi touched them with his palm, he immediately recognized that they were made of a rare acquired spirit item, the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. Not only was this acquired spirit wood flexible and strong, it could even withstand the attacks from magical items that were lower than mid-tier magical treasures, and it was an expert in isolating sound and divine sense. No one below the realm of heaven immortal could use their divine sense to penetrate the barrier of the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys, and there was no way they could eavesdrop on the voices of the people inside. Twitching his lips, Wuqi shook his head. He felt lucky that he had found an innate spirit item with wood element beforehand, and was able to cultivate the source of wood chapter, a thread of innate wood element energy, which brought with it a vigorous life force, came out from his palm and quietly fused into the coach made from the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. In an instant, it transformed into a large net and enveloped the entire coach. It was as if the sound-isolating tree of myriad valleys was cheering and welcoming Wuqi's innate energy. Wherever Wuqi's innate energy passed through, the tree would adjust its internal structure cooperatively. The coach, which could isolate all sound and divine sense, immediately turned into a funnel. Immediately, Wuqi could clearly hear the conversation between Lu Buwei and another young man in the coach, and his divine sense had also sensed the existence of both men. Lu Buwei breathed out a heavy sigh, shook his head and said, "In Great Yen, Xiao is still too young and inexperienced, and he can't take charge on his own. Longfeng, in the future, you will have to help Xiao in his work." It was supposed to be a simple matter, but he had to make it so tense, and even drew out Nie Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. This is not worth it. When doing business, harmony brings wealth. Why is there a need to fight and kill? Sighing lightly, Lu Buwei continued in an indifferent tone. At least, before we can mine enough spatial breaching spirit gold, and build the universal teleportation formations that can be found everywhere under the heaven, it is not a good idea to start a war. Only a few of you juniors are capable, and you will have to stay in different dynasties. Patriarch is made of iron, how many nails can he hit? The coach fell into a moment of silence, then the young man Wei Longfeng said with a deep voice, "Rest assured, Patriarch. I will do my best to help Xiao, and I will try my best to prevent her from doing anything too outrageous. But Xiao is Patriarch's granddaughter. How can I restrain her?" Lu Buwei threw out a pale golden medallion and said coolly, "Take this medallion. When she goes too far, take it out to deter her." Nie Baihong has forced her to swear an oath on her prime divine soul, forbidding her from tangling with Duke Yen Li's mansion. In order to avoid the oath, she actually used the soul replacement puppet, which is the only 13 of us in our clan, to erase her oath. She is simply fooling around. Wei Longfeng remained silent, while Lu Buwei sighed and said, "Soul replacement puppet is a precious treasure, and yet, she actually used it in a dispute because of her personal feelings. Although there is an iron mine in Duke Yen Li's fief that has produced a rare treasure, the spatial breaching spirit gold, it is not worth it to use that soul replacement puppet. Patriarch, can solve the problem with just a few words. So, why did she have to make such a fuss? After a moment of silence, Lu Buwei said with a serious tone, Yen Dan, Jing Ku, and a few others from Great Yen Dynasty are easy to deal with, but Wei Wuji, Tianwen, Zhao Sheng, Huangxia, and a few others are people who will devour us without spitting out the bones. If Patriarch is not roaming around, our clan would have long been devoured by them. With a solemn expression, Wei Longfeng stared at Lu Buwei and kept nodding his head. Lu Buwei breathed out a long sigh, shook his head and said, Patriarch can travel millions of miles with the great transporting technique of 5 ghosts. But this mystic technique can only be used once every 6 months. The reason why I came to Great Yen this time is for that spatial breaching spirit gold. I'm afraid the next time I come here will be a few years later. It seems like Great Wei and Great Zhao have discovered each other's existence, and they are now preparing for a great war. In the next few years, Patriarch will be guarding that place, and I'll take care of things amidst the chaos. So Longfeng, you have to be cautious in the affairs of Great Yen Dynasty. With utmost reverence, Wei Longfeng knelt in the coach and gave Lu Buwei 2 kowtows. Lu Buwei nodded his head, sighed and said, It's a pity that you're not from the lineage clan. The rules of the clan are set by me, Patriarch, and I can't break them easily. Compared to Xiao Xiao and the others, you are much smarter and capable. Make some contributions, so that I can make an exception and promote you into the lineage clan during the clan assembly. Wei Longfeng's expression changed, and he gave Lu Buwei a few more kowtows. Lu Buwei smiled, stroked his beard, and accepted the kowtows. He blinked his eyes, pondered quickly for a while, then gave another order. Put all the spies in Great Yen Dynasty into use, and monitor the movements of Yingzheng and Baiqi. Since they entered a secluded cultivation in Daqin 30 years ago, Patriarch could no longer sense their aura in Daqin. I have no idea where they have gone to. Perhaps they will come here? No one can say for sure. Once again, Wei Longfeng answered respectfully. Only then did Lu Buwei nod his head, breathed out a long sigh, and carefully advised Wei Longfeng for a while. Suddenly 5 beams of 5 colors, red, white, green, blue, and black, burst out from his body. 5 little ghosts, who stood only 1 foot and 2 inches tall, leaped out from the 5 beams, each holding a lotus throne glinting with a golden gleam in their hands. Then they lifted Lu Buwei up. The 5 beams of 5 colors rotated and suddenly tore open a pitch-black hole in the air in the coach. Drenched in sweat, the 5 little ghosts leaped into the hole, and in just a blink of an eye, they brought Lu Buwei and disappeared without a trace. Wuxia narrowed his eyes, as he recognized the origin of this cultivation technique. It was the transporting technique of 5 ghosts, which he found in the Scroll of Stealing. When cultivated to a higher level, one could transform into the body of a heavenly ghost, allowing one to travel freely in the void without any hindrance. Obviously, Lu Buwei had not cultivated to the highest level, as he still had to rely on the help of the 5 heavenly ghosts he had raised to travel through the void with his fleshly body. Judging from what he said, this old fellow had actually established a base outside of Great Yin Dynasty? Obviously, the contribution of the transporting technique of 5 ghosts could not go unnoticed. While most of the cultivators of Great Yin Dynasty were still confined to the territory of Great Yin Dynasty, Lu Buwei had already begun to travel around the world. Fortunately, his cultivation base was not profound, and he could only travel a super long distance once every half a year. Lu Buwei, a formidable enemy. Suddenly, Wuxia had a feeling. This old fellow had cast a net that had completely covered the entire Great Yin Dynasty. Perhaps, the death of Yen Buji must have something to do with Wei Merchant. What Lu Buwei wanted was not those few iron ores, but the spatial breaching spirit gold that had mutated underneath 2 iron ores. This could explain where the spatial breaching spirit gold found in the secret chamber of Shi Martial Club came from. Presumably, it was a secret stash that Shi Tianma had secretly collected when he was helping Wei Xiaoxiao. After a brief moment of pondering, Wuxia quietly pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf, thrusting it through the bottom of the coach and piercing deep into Wei Longfeng's body. It went straight through his dantian and sliced his Jin Dan into pieces. Not even in his wildest dream did Wei Longfeng expect that he would be attacked here. Before he could react, his Jin Dan was shattered by Wu Qi's sword, and his blood essence and aura began to rush into Wu Qi's body like a raging river. As he was cultivating with a fire element cultivation technique, he was a human immortal of early-stage Jin Dan realm. As the raging fire element energy kept rushing into Wu Qi's fire meridians, in just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, all his spirit, energy and soul were completely absorbed by Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi's eyes shone with a faint flame as he plunged back into the ground. After that, he casually threw out a thread of divine flame of order and smashed it onto the coach. The purple-green flame spread and quickly enveloped the entire coach. In just a blink of an eye, the coach was burned into ashes. Chapter 134. Early in the morning, Wu Qi, whose cultivation of the Source of Fire chapter had advanced to the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, left his room feeling refreshed. The bracelet which Lu Buwei had abandoned was now lying quietly in his left sleeve. After all, he had rejected the gift given to him last night. Although Lu Buwei had abandoned it, and Wu Qi took it out with the thought of recycling it, it did not look good. Therefore, he did not wear it on his wrist openly but hid it in his sleeve. After all, it was a gift given by Lu Buwei, the treacherous hero of this generation. There were 7 layers of storage space in the bracelet, and each of them was twice as big as the storage ring given to Wu Qi by Princess Zhonglu. In each of the 7 layers of storage space, there was a flying sword of upper-tier magical item level, which contained 7 different energies: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, ice, and thunder. For the cultivators of heaven-breaking sword sect, no matter which sword technique they were cultivating, they could always use a flying sword with 7 different energies. Apart from the 7 flying swords, there were also a gold mountain, a silver mountain, a copper mountain, an iron mountain, an emerald mountain, a white jade mountain, and a crystal mountain inside the bracelet. The value of gold and silver was over 10 million taels of silver, and the weight of copper and iron was at least 4 to 5 million kilograms. There were emerald, white jade, crystal, and many other precious stones, and the amount of each pile was over 100,000. It was indeed a great merchant that had branches in all the kingdoms. With such a generous gift, it was more than enough to befriend Wu Qi, a mere marquis of Tianyin of Great Yan dynasty, who did not have any background. If Lu Buwei had not met Wu Qi, the freak, with such a generous gift, he would definitely be able to win over a man who might be useful to him in the future. Too bad, I'm not Lu Qingfeng and the others. After killing the elite members of the old man's clan, I can burn the corpses and erase all the evidence, and then I can use the huge wealth given by the old man to buy some stuff in the market. Why does it feel so good? Riding on the back of the single-horned deer, Wu Qi shook his head and hummed a little tune as he arrived at the market of 4 Seas alone. After asking a few brokers who were loitering at the entrance of the market, Wu Qi found Fairski, who had helped him buy the mermaid oil last time. Fairski, who was running towards the entrance of the market, saw Wu Qi from afar, and his face was full of smiles. From afar, he hurriedly shouted, "Marquis, you came to the market of 4 Seas to choose treasures again? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, Marquis." Wu Qi cast a glance at Fairski with a smile. Then he jumped down from his mount and threw a long list to Fairski. "Cut the crap. You'll get your share." Looking at the items on this list, he should be able to gather them in the market of the 4 Seas. It was just that the quantity was a little more, but it wasn't rare. "Help me prepare well. We must collect everything by today." Fairski hurriedly took over the list and quickly glanced at the dozens of materials written down by Wu Qi. They were all kinds of materials, such as 100 tempered iron essence, 100-year dark iron, 1,000-year cold iron, 1,000-year lava iron essence, and so on. All of them were made of various kinds of metals. Each of them weighed at least several million kilograms. Although the quantity was huge, it was not rare at all. Wu Qi proudly patted his left sleeve like a nouveau riche. He laughed out loud and said, "Prepare as soon as possible. We must deliver the goods by today. Don't give me. Don't save money for me. Ha ha ha, I nearly forgot that I'm also a nobleman." I've made a fortune in the past couple of days. You only need to send these goods to me. Apart from the quantity listed on the list, it'll be best if you have more. Fersky smiled so widely that his eyes had narrowed into two lines. He hurriedly led Wuxia into the market of Four Seas, and sat down in the same tea house as last time. After that, he hastily ran out of the tea house to help Wuxia prepare the goods. He ran so fast that his feet almost touched the back of his head. The merchants in the market of Four Seas loved to do business like Wuxia's the most. Materials such as 100-tempered iron essence and 100-year dark iron were precious, but not rare. If the quantity was large enough, the profit would be astonishingly high. Last time, the materials such as mermaid oil that Wuxia bought were extremely expensive and rare. Although they were all extremely expensive because of the small quantity, the profit was not as good as selling a large quantity of these materials that were not so rare. This time, Wuxia had listed out the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and other materials that he wanted to buy, and he had even said that the more the better. Therefore, this business was definitely going to be successful. Throwing the storage bracelet on the table, Wuxia sat by the table, sipping his fragrant tea in a leisurely manner, while looking at the merchants and customers coming and going on the street through the window. Occasionally, some merchants would send some rare and exotic goods. Putting aside those non-living objects, those rare birds and beasts were an eye-opener for Wuxia. This world was extremely rich in species, and strange things were emerging in an endless stream. The tea lasted for the whole morning, and then half of the afternoon had passed. When the sun was about to set in the west, Fersky, who was covered in sweat, finally rushed back. Behind him were a dozen other merchants, who were also sweating profusely. They walked into the tea house silently with a big smile on their faces, then placed the storage rings on their fingers in front of Wuxia. After scanning through these storage rings with his divine sense, Wuxia nodded satisfactorily. The quantity of various goods had far exceeded Wuxia's demand, nearly 10 times more than what he needed. He transferred all the goods from these storage rings into this storage bracelet with a huge capacity, then asked Fersky for the total price, and paid for all the goods with real gold and silver without bargaining. Weighing the bracelet in his hand, Wuxia smiled indifferently and said, "It seems the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and a few other materials is a little less?" Fersky's face, which looked like a blooming chrysanthemum, suddenly turned gloomy. Frowning, he looked at Wuxia, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Materials like 100-tempered iron essence and other materials are controlled by Great Yin Dynasty, used to smelt all kinds of armors and weapons. More than half of this business is controlled by Wei Merchant, and we can't find too many of them in the market of Four Seas. But when dealing with Wei Merchant Miss Wei Xiaoxiao, it's really not easy to talk to her now." Great Yin Dynasty had implemented a special control on materials like 100-tempered iron essence, but those materials like 1,000-years-old lava iron that ordinary people couldn't use, and could only be used by cultivators, were not restricted. Therefore, the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence put together by these dozens of merchants was only slightly more than 50,000 kilograms, more than what Wuxia requested. Unlike those other cultivation materials, the quantity of each of them had skyrocketed. Wuxia nodded his head, smiled and said, "I understand. You've done a good job. In the future, if I need anything, I'll still look for you." He paused for a brief moment, then Wuxia pulled out an identity token and threw it over to Fersky, saying, "Help me keep an eye on this place. In the future, if there are any good materials that can be used by cultivators in the market of Four Seas, or something that belongs to 5 elements, or something that you can't identify, just go straight to Duke Yanli's mansion and look for me." Fersky's face blushed with excitement. He hastily took over the identity token, and couldn't even say a word. With this identity token, he could be considered as the personal manager of Marquis Tianyan, and his status in the market of Four Seas would definitely rise to a higher level. Not only Marquis Tianyan, he had also formed a relationship with Duke Yanli's mansion. In the future, his meteoric rise was just around the corner. Bringing with him a bracelet filled with various metal materials, Wuxia quickly left the market of Four Seas, riding his mount and heading towards Mount White Sunday. Stroking the storage bracelet, which had a smooth surface and felt cold to the touch, Wuqi's heart was filled with endless joy. With these metal materials, he could use the mystic technique of scroll of stealing to refine the minor universal alloy. This alloy was the crystallization of several dozens of rare metal materials, and was a material used in crafting upper-grade magical treasures. Of course, the main use of this material was to craft the minor universal teleportation formation, which was the base of short-distance teleportation formations. Together with the spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained last time, and the huge amount of energy stones given to him by Princess Zhonglu, he could easily craft several hundred of these formation discs, constructing a dense network of teleportation formations that belonged solely to him. With these teleportation formations, he could attack and defend whenever he wanted. As long as he could set up some secret caves and hiding places, he would have the confidence to protect himself in this world. No matter if it was Lao Ai, Lu Buwei, the four princes of the Warring States period, the first emperor Yingzheng, or the murderer Wang Baiqi. As long as he had the minor universal teleportation formation, Wuqi could ignore all of them. Although this teleportation formation was only a teleportation formation within a planet, and the furthest distance of teleportation was 10 million miles, for Wuqi it was more than enough. With 10 million kilometers of space to move strategically, who could do anything to him? Throwing his head back and laughing out loud, Wuqi spurred his mount and sped out of Ji City, rushing towards Mount White Sun at the fastest speed. When he was leaving the city, he could clearly sense a few hostile gazes staring at his back. He had a rough idea of who these people were. What he had done during the past few days had turned the already muddy pond of Ji City into a muddy pit. He had no idea how many people were thinking about him. Among them, the ones who were thinking about him the most were none other than a few people. Grinning coldly, Wuqi injected the innate wood energy into the single-horned deer's body. The wood energy transformed into wind, and as Wuqi recited an incantation, a large sheet of green wind suddenly burst out from under the hooves of the deer. Along with a swishing sound, the single-horned elk took less than one-third of the usual time to reach Mount White Sunday. Looking back at the pitch-dark Ji City on the horizon, a strange smile emerged on Wuqi's face. I don't care what kind of storm you are going to throw at me. Now all I need is the innate gold energy, and I'll be able to gather all 5 elements. Hee. When I've mastered all 5 elements of 7 foundation establishment technique and formed the Golden Dan, my overall strength will be comparable to an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. At that time, I'll deal with you. Leaping off the mount, Wuqi stamped his feet and murmured under his breath. Since I'm already here, I might as well live a more exciting life. My exciting life is destined to be paved with the tragedy of many people. Wei Longfeng, you unlucky bastard, you've saved me a lot of time and effort. Speaking of which, it has been a long time since I last saw Qin Shuwen. If only I could steal all of his Golden Dan energy, hee. Pulling the mount and entering Mount White Sun, Wuqi ignored all the disciples of heaven-breaking sword sect along the way, and came to the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. He patted the mount's butt and told it to go back to graze on the grass. After that, he tilted his head up and cried out loudly, Master, Grand Elder, are you there? Disciple Wuqi is here to see you. I have something good to tell you. A white beam shot down from the top of the cliff, wrapped around Wuqi, and brought him up to the top of the cliff. At the top of the cliff, Nie Yaonu had transplanted another batch of ancient pine trees from an unknown place, and planted them in front of the entrance of sword stems from the mine. A few more stone blocks and a stone table were placed under the pine trees. She and Nie Baihong were sitting next to the stone table. A pot of tea was placed on the table, emitting a sweet aroma. Upon seeing Wuqi, Nie Baihong frowned and asked, How is your cultivation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements? You can't learn the sword techniques of heaven-breaking sword sect without reaching the mastery of Xiantian realm. You've been running around everywhere, and I don't see you doing anything serious. Ignoring Nie Baihong, Wuqi turned to Nie Yaonu and said smilingly, Grand Elder, disciple will exchange the sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning for the sword technique of azure water, sword technique of green thunder, and sword technique of thunderclap. I also need to borrow a good equipment crafting room, as there are some things that I need to process. Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong sprung to their feet and cried out in surprise. What? Mountain crumbling and sky burning? Chapter 135. Without hesitation, Nie Yanu grabbed Wuqi and dragged him into the cave abode of sword stems from the mind. Nie Baihong unleashed a few sword beams, hacking and slashing around the main peak for a while. When he found no one was hiding in the vicinity, he hastily plunged into the cave abode. Both mother and son grabbed Wuqi and sprinted all the way into the Peerless Sword Formation Pavilion. Nie Yaonu forcefully pressed Wuqi onto a hassock, then glared at Wuqi with bloodshot eyes and shouted, "What did you say? The sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning? How did you know about these two sword techniques? Where did you get them?" On the other side, Nie Baihong directly shot out wisps of sharp energy from his eyes, pressing down on Wuqi as he said, "These two sword techniques are the two missing parts of heaven-breaking sword sect's 5 elemental sword techniques. Without them, the highest sword intent of heaven-breaking sword sect, the unity of sword energies script, would never be able to attain the mastery level. Although Mother has managed to complete the unity of sword energies script by reversing the cultivation technique of wood, metal, and water sword techniques, it is, after all, not an orthodox technique. Therefore, its power is only about 40% of the true unity of sword energies." Grabbing Wuqi's shoulder with both hands, Nie Baihong said with a deep voice, "Tell me quickly, where did you learn about the sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning? And where did you get them? These two sword techniques are extremely important to our sect. You can't make fun of them." Looking at the extremely nervous Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, Wuqi breathed out a long sigh and said, "Didn't Elder Yin tell you about this? I thought he should have told you both long ago. Yesterday, when I was in the Mo forest, I witnessed old Mr. Mod using a clump of purple flame to calcine 3 barbarian stone tablets of inheritance, and from them, I managed to find 4 cultivation techniques. I quickly memorized them." Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong's expressions froze, and they couldn't help but exchange a glance. Wuqi did not keep them in suspense. Instead, he told Nie Yaonu and her son about how he was summoned by Jing Ke to Mo Forest yesterday, met with Mod, and secretly memorized 2 sword techniques. When he was done, he smiled at the two of them and said, "Logically speaking, the great general should have sent someone to inform Elder Yin early in the morning after obtaining these 2 sword techniques." Nie Yaonu snorted coldly, staring at the ceiling and didn't say anything for a long while. On the other side, Nie Baihong sneered and said, "If he obtained these 2 sword techniques, he would only let his disciples cultivate them. Why would he give them to us? These 2 sword techniques were not of much use to him. They could not increase his magic power or divine abilities at all. But in the hands of Mother and I, we can truly complete the origin of sword chi formula. Mother originally needed 10 years to truly become a nascent soul, but now it may only take a few months." Wuqi blinked his eyes and said with a smile, "All right, disciple will write down the sword technique and hand it over to Master and Grand Elder. But this is what disciple wants." Nie Yaonu said resolutely, "Except for the origin of sword chi formula, which I can't teach you yet, I can give you the other 3 sword techniques now. You want a crafting room? I happen to have a pretty good crafting room here. And the flame in it is the magma flame from the Earth's core. No matter what you want to craft, this flame will be more than enough." Wuqi clapped his hands, laughed and said, "Excellent. Grand Elder is indeed generous." Without hesitation, Nie Yaonu took out 3 small booklets, in which were the cultivation techniques of the Azure Water Sword Technique, Green Thunder Sword Technique, and Thunder Lightning Sword Technique. Wuqi did not waste any time. Nie Yaonu personally carried a writing table to him, while Nie Baihong stood beside her, helping him grind the ink and brush. Wuqi began to write down the sword techniques of the mountain crumbling sword technique and the sky burning sword technique, which he had memorized. Then he wrote down all 36 energy circulation diagrams and all the incantations of the cultivation techniques without missing a single word. Whenever Wuqi finished drawing an energy circulation diagram, Nie Yaonu would quickly snatch it over and give it a careful look. The smile on her face grew brighter and brighter. On the other side, Nie Baihong was nervously telling Wuqi, "Don't make any mistake, don't make any mistake. If a single meridian goes wrong, My mother will face the risk of suffering from energy deviation. Nie Baihong kept talking and nagging. Normally he was cold, merciless, and decisive, but today, he was no different than a long-tongued old granny. In the end, even Nie Yaonu could not stand him any longer. She grabbed Nie Baihong and threw him far away. Shut up. How could an old granny have such an impatient child like you? Get the hell out of here. Search carefully in the sect, and see if that old fool Yanli has obtained the two sword techniques. After pondering for a brief moment, Nie Yaonu said coldly, Yanli has taken in a few new disciples before the new year, and all of them have spirit seed constitutions of earth and fire element. It looks like he has been prepared for this. Find an opportunity and let these few disciples die in an accident. As for the clans behind these few disciples, it's up to you. Wuxia raised his head and gave Nie Yaonu a look, whose face was filled with a murderous aura, and nodded his head silently. The internal strife of heaven-breaking sword sect had come to this. At the critical moment, Nie Yaonu was much more useful than Nie Baihong. Presumably, these disciples taken in by Yanli were the geniuses who were the most suitable to cultivate the mountain-crumbling and sky-burning sword techniques. If Nie Baihong really assassinated these few disciples, Yanli would have a big headache. After spending half an hour, Wuxia finally handed over the two complete sword techniques to Nie Yaonu. After reading them carefully, Nie Yaonu breathed out a sigh and said, Finally, I've completed the sword techniques of 5 elements. Now the other sword techniques derived from them will not be a problem anymore. The unity of sword energies script of heaven-breaking sword sect is finally complete. However, it is a little strange. Why would the sword techniques of heaven-breaking sword sect appear in the territory of barbarians? And why did the ancestors of barbarians fuse them into the stone tablets of inheritance? And why would the scouting office send someone to search the barbarian territory? Wuxia was surprised by Nie Yaonu's question as well. He pondered for a while, then vaguely gave her a possible answer. Before Great Yan Dynasty was founded, this place was the territory of the Barbarian Alliance. With the strength of barbarians at that time, it shouldn't be a difficult task for them to break into some immortal's cave and take away some legacy techniques. However, no one knew why the barbarians only took away 2 sword techniques. Nie Yaonu added some explanations to Wuqi's answer. When she found this immortal's cave, 3 sword techniques were placed in 3 different places, and the places where the mountain-crumbling and sky-burning sword techniques were supposed to be placed were empty. Presumably, it was because of what Wuxia said, that these 2 sword techniques were taken away by the barbarians. Both of them exchanged a glance, and both felt that this was the only explanation. Since Great Yan Dynasty had wiped out the Barbarian Alliance in the war in those years, they must have some knowledge about the situation of the barbarians. Therefore, they must have some clues about which tribe took away some cultivation techniques. After over 2,000 years of relentless investigation, it was reasonable for them to have some results. However, the fact that the cultivation techniques of Yandan, Jingke, and the others were not complete in the hands of the barbarians had shocked Nie Yaonu. Despite cultivating with incomplete cultivation techniques, they were still able to wipe out the Barbarian Alliance. Was it because the barbarians were too weak? Or was it because Yandan, Jingke, and the others were too strong? Shaking their heads, both of them decided not to pursue this question further. Nie Yaonu solemnly kept the sword techniques into her storage ring, then brought Wuxia to the crafting room where he saw her crafting flying swords when he stole the dustless lamp last time. On the floor of the empty crafting room, a large suppressing formation was constructed using various fire-resistant materials. Nearly 1,000 upper-tier earth elemental energy stones, each the size of a human head, were embedded in the formation, firmly suppressing the raging lava flame that was about to burst out from underground. A 30 feet tall, 3-legged bronze cauldron was seen hovering in the middle of the formation. All 3 legs of the cauldron were emitting a pale green glow, and a threatening cold breeze was vaguely spreading out from them. At the center of the formation, there was a roughly 1-foot wide fire hole, weaving into a very large light barrier. Nie Yaonu brought Wuxia to this place, then looked at him suspiciously and said, "With your current cultivation base, the water elemental cultivation technique you cultivated should have become useless. Although you have cultivated the qi circulating technique of 5 elements to Xiantian realm, your cultivation base is still too weak. What are you trying to craft with the flame of earth core? Wu Qi looked at Nie Yaonu smilingly, shook his head and said, Grand Elder, please activate the formation. I think this bronze cauldron can be used to craft items, right? What I'm trying to craft is not some magical treasures or items, but some materials. Our young master is studying the formation, so he needs to deploy some formation diagrams and foundations. With a wave of his hand, he threw out a mountain of all kinds of refined iron, 100-year dark iron, and other materials from his bracelet. Looking at these materials, Nie Yaonu could not help but burst into laughter. She shook her head and said, After fighting with that old fool Yanli for too long, I've become more and more paranoid. Well, with the cultivation base of a little kid, what else can you craft? These materials, they are actually suitable to be used to construct a low-grade formation diagram. Nie Yaonu gave these materials, the highest quality of which could only be used to craft lower-grade magical items, and immediately, she no longer had any doubts. Then, she performed a few incantation gestures, activating the formation in the crafting room. Slowly, the green light barrier underneath the 3-legged cauldron cracked open, revealing a finger-sized hole. From there, a straight red flame shot out along with an ear-splitting whistling noise. In just a blink of an eye, the entire cauldron turned red. The temperature in the room began to rise, and the surrounding earth elemental energy stones began to flash rapidly. Gradually, a heavy force pressed down from all directions, firmly restraining the scorching heat to a radius of 10 meters around the cauldron. Nie Yaonu shook her head disinterestedly, spun and walked out of the room, watching Wu Qi throw all the materials into the cauldron in a strict manner according to a certain ratio. She was in a hurry to figure out the 2 sword techniques, and did not have the mood to fool around with Wu Qi here. How big of a trouble could a little guy of Xiantian realm cause? Hastily, Wu Qi closed the thick and heavy stone door of the crafting room. He scanned the cauldron with his divine will, and sensed the rapid melting of all the materials he threw into it. A complacent smile emerged on his face. The minor change universal alloy was a secret formula recorded in the scroll of stealing, and basically, no one in the world of cultivators knew about it. It was the formula that the mysterious figure who passed the scroll of stealing to Wu Qi had spent a lot of time and effort to research. As a qualified thief, the most important thing was to have a way to escape. Apart from all kinds of escape arts and techniques, what else was the best way to escape other than teleportation formations? Not only the minor universal teleportation formation, even the grand universal teleportation formation, and all kinds of teleportation formations that could teleport across galaxies, were all analyzed and explained in detail in the scroll of stealing. However, as of now, Wu Qi did not have any high-quality materials to craft those teleportation formations. Therefore, he could only stare at those crafting methods while drooling. Using his divine will, he carefully controlled the melting rate of all the various molten metals in the cauldron, then began to fuse them according to a unique dimensional crystal structure, turning these ordinary metals into the minor change universal alloy, whose value had increased by thousands of times. With the help of the flame from the Earth's core, the first minor universal teleportation formation was cast by Wu Qi 12 hours later. It was an 8 feet in diameter, 6 inches thick, translucent, pale blue, and had the same color as the sky. As it was formed in one piece, the traces of the formation, as well as the inlaid spots of various energy stones, were left on its surface. Wiping off the sweat from his forehead, Wu Qi continued his work. A single formation disc was not enough for him to teleport. Chapter 136. Therefore, he could not let Wei Xiaoxiao get her hands on the spatial breaching spirit gold. Either Wu Qi stole all the spatial breaching spirit gold from the mine, or he simply uprooted all the businesses of Lu Buwei in Ji City. If Lao Ai knew that Lu Buwei had also meddled in Ji City, what would his reaction be? His face was filled with uncertainty. While Wu Qi was pondering all sorts of ruthless thoughts, Haoying Fengying's voice suddenly came from the roadside. Brother Wu, Senior Brother Wu, Marquis Tianyan, I've finally found you. With a smile on his face, Wuxia thanked the young girls who called themselves Qingyu and Ziyu, then followed them into the treasure-keeping pavilion. There were many items in the treasure-keeping pavilion, but Wuxia did not have the mood to waste his time here. He picked out a close-fitting defensive robe, a pair of magical cloud boots that could increase the speed of flying by 30%, a heart protection mirror, a 5-beam sword crown, and a pearl that could release the fog. After that, he left the treasure-keeping pavilion. When he thought of the possibility that Lu Buwei, the cunning old fox, would appear in Ji City at any time, and when he thought of the peerless evil man, Lao Ai, living in Ji City, Wuxia felt a sharp pain in his head. If his cultivation base had already reached the realm of gold immortal, he would not have to worry about these things, as he could just strangle these people to death. However, with the current cultivation base of Lu Buwei and Lao Ai, they could easily kill him with just a finger. If he did not plan carefully, it would be impossible for him to succeed. Wuxia raised his head up and saw Haoying Fengying striding out from a small path in the forest with a big smile on his face. Together with a few young men, they came to greet Wuxia attentively. With great enthusiasm, Haoying Fengying grabbed both of Wuqia's hands, laughed out loud and said, "Where is my Marquis Wu? Some time ago, I was told that you've returned to the mountain. I've been waiting here for you, but I never saw you. I don't care about anything else. I've prepared a few jars of good wine here. If you don't finish all of them today, you're not allowed to leave." The single-horned deer, whose belly was round and full, comfortably snorted, then rubbed its big head against Wuqia's body a few times. Wuxia did not ride on it. He pulled the reins and slowly brought it towards the gate of Baiyang Mountain. As he walked slowly, he pondered what to do next. Now that he had the minor heavenly cycle teleportation formations array disk, he needed to quickly set up a few escape routes. However, he still had to plan carefully as to how he would act. This was the way of the world. When Haoying Fenglong was out of luck, the market for Haoying Fengying would naturally increase. Hence, Wuxia needed to befriend him. With a smile on his face, Wuxia waved his hand and invited a few young men of the Haoying family who were standing behind Haoying Fengying into the pavilion. After that, the group of people sat down, pouring themselves a cup of wine and enjoying themselves. The scenery of the mountain here was quiet and beautiful, with no one to disturb them. The wine was 100-years-old wine, and the fruits and dishes were of the best quality. Drinking like this was indeed a great pleasure. Immediately, Wuxia let go of the reins and drove the single-horned elk to the forest beside the road to graze, while he held Haoying Fengying's hand. Both of them walked side by side, laughing and walking towards a small clearing at the end of the shady path. There was a pond with a dark green color, giving off a tranquil atmosphere. The soft grass by the shore was densely covered with colorful flowers. Surrounding them was a dense bamboo forest. The sound of bamboo rustling could be heard when the wind blew. It was an extremely quiet and tranquil place. While Wuxia sat down and drank a pot of wine, a fist-sized, golden-eyed, black-feathered pigeon flew into a house outside the imperial palace at top speed, leaving a black line behind it. Tuoba Haofeng, who was sitting in the main hall of the house, grabbed the pigeon and pulled out a small piece of paper from the bone ring on its toe. There were no words written on the paper, only the drawing of a small dagger. Both Blue Moon and Ziyu did not have the ability of Nie Yaonu using her sword beam to capture someone from a distance. As both of them were in secluded cultivation, Wuxia had no choice but to slowly climb down the cliff using the green vines. When he was passing through a stretch of ancient pine trees, he was even chased by a few big white cranes, which gave Wuxia a hard time. Standing on top of the cliff, Blue Moon and Ziyu were watching Wuxia dodging the attacks of the big white cranes in a flurry, and they couldn't help but burst out laughing. Wuxia was so angry that his nose twitched. He nearly lost control of himself and unleashed his flying sword to kill these few white cranes. It took him a lot of effort to restrain the anger in his heart. Therefore, he had no choice but to borrow the power of the earth core flame in the immortal's cave of sword stems from the mind. Wuxia performed an incantation gesture, once again sealing the earth core flame that burst out from the cave. After that, he tidied up all the leftover materials and waste materials that splashed all over the place, and cleaned up the crafting room. After making sure there was no trash left behind, He moved the stone door of the crafting room and strode out. If not because I don't want to expose the fact that I've already formed the Jin Dan, I'll definitely kill all of you with my flying sword. Smilingly looking at these big white cranes, Wuxia whistled. The single-horned deer he kept at the foot of the cliff responded with a cry from a distance, then leaped and leaped towards Wuxia. It stuck out its fat tongue and licked Wuqi's face a few times. Previously in Heaven's Will Palace, when facing the enormous pressure from Qin Shuwen, Haoying Fengying could still stand up for justice and speak up. Therefore he could be considered as a worthy friend. Haoying Fengying pulled Wuqi's arm, smiled and said, "I've been waiting here for a few days now. The fruits and dishes are freshly made every day. I hope brother will like them." He pulled Wuqi's arm and respectfully led him into the pavilion, sitting on the main seat. Patting on the skinny body of the single-horned deer, Wuqi sighed lovingly and said, "For the past 2 days, you can only eat grass. You've suffered a lot." From his storage ring, Wuqi took out a bag of high-quality fodder and fed it to the single-horned deer, letting it eat until it was full. Then Tuoba Haofeng tore the piece of paper in his hand and cried out sternly, "Pass down my order. Get ready to strike. Somebody, follow me into the palace. Bring Miss Yu's name card with you." I don't believe that bitch Zhanglu will refuse to accept my invitation when Miss Yu personally invites me. This world was filled with a very strange atmosphere, and Wuqi did not want to die here without any preparation. He gave this pair of teenage girls, who were obviously twin sisters. Both of them had the cultivation base of physique strengthening tier of Xiantian realm. Judging from their young age, they must be the trusted disciples of Nie Yaonu, who had meticulously trained them. Last time, when Wuqi came to steal the dustless lamp in the middle of the night, he did not sense the similar aura of these 2 teenage girls. Apparently, Nie Yaonu's trump card was not only this immortal's cave, and she must have other mansions in other places. The sky had just brightened, and the sun had just risen 30 feet into the sky. There was still some fog that had yet to disperse. Crafting the minor universal teleportation formation was a strenuous task. After Wuqi had familiarized himself with the crafting process, his speed became faster and faster. Finally, 12 days later he had successfully crafted over 180 formation discs, and stored all of them in his storage ring. Apart from these formation discs, he had also crafted several hundreds of formation discs of various sizes, made from ordinary metals, ranging from 1 origin formation to 6 direction formation. He planned to give them to Lu Qingfeng and himself, who could also use them. While shouting and laughing all the way, Wuqi gave 2 middle fingers to the big white cranes that were flying towards him from the sky. While laughing wildly, he picked up a rock from the ground, casually pinched it into countless pebbles, and threw them towards those big birds. The pebbles pierced through the air and accurately hit on the necks of these big birds. The pain made them scream and soar up into the sky, not daring to come down and fight with Wuqi again. Between the bamboo forest and the pond, there was a small pavilion, built using the bark of pine and cypress trees that were pulled out from the ground. Currently there were a few cushions, a few short tables, 10 jars of fine wine, and some delicious fruits and delicacies placed in the pavilion. It was neatly and tidily arranged. After forming the Jin Dan, the cultivator would be able to craft items with the Samadhi True Flame. But too bad, the 2 Jin Dan formed by Wuqi were innate water elemental. Although they had a mighty power, they could not control the flame. Also, he could not control the divine flame of order freely. Using this innate divine flame, which ranked in the top 5 in the entire universe, to craft a formation disc was really overkill. Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong were nowhere to be seen. Only a pair of teenage girls, clad in a light yellow short skirt and a light green shirt, were waiting outside the door to welcome Wuqi. Both of them told him with a gentle tone that both Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong were in a secluded cultivation, trying to comprehend the sword technique. He could leave after he was done with the task, and when Nie Baihong had achieved some success in comprehending the sword technique, she would pay him a visit in Ji City. A couple dozens of dark shadows flashed across the courtyard at top speed, leaving behind a faint, almost inaudible sound of wind piercing. While dragging Wuqi and walking towards the small path in the woods, Haoying Fengying said with great hospitality, I have to thank my brother. Houying Fenglong was sent to the northernmost region by His Majesty to build a city and establish his business. As his foundation is unstable, he will never be able to return to Ji City for the rest of his life. Once he left, the power of his branch will be greatly reduced, and my status in Houying clan has risen rapidly. It is all thanks to my brother. These items were all mid-grade magical items, and could be used by injecting a little bit of divine sense into them. On the spot, Wuxia changed into a treasured outfit, a pair of cloud boots, and a protective mirror. He hid the pearl under his sleeve, and fastened the sword crown on his head with a ribbon. With his hair that was neither too long nor too short now, the sword crown could barely fit on his head. The sword crown took the shape of 5 dragons circling around the moon, and a cold gleam could be vaguely seen in each of the 5 dragon heads. They were actually 5 tiny flying swords, and as long as the divine sense was activated, they could transform into cold gleams and hurt people. Very soon the coach was ready. Tuoba Haofeng boarded the coach and brought a large group of guards, heading straight for the imperial palace. When Houying Fenglong was forced to build a city and establish his own country in the northernmost snowland, Wuxia smiled. No matter what, Houying clan was still in charge of the position of criminal and minister, which was the highest position among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers of Great Yan dynasty. If he could rope Houying Fenglong to his side and make him his man, at least the incident where he was framed at the city gate would not happen again, and he would have another helper in Ji City. After putting on a few magical items that he had obtained for free, Wuxia thanked Blue Moon and Purple Moon, then left the cave under their guidance. Both young ladies also told him that there were 3 treasure chambers in the cave, and many items that could be used by cultivators were kept in those chambers. As for Wuxia, he was given the credit of learning the sword technique, so he was allowed to pick 5 or less treasures from the treasure chambers and bring them away. As for Wei clan, what Wei merchant wanted was the spatial breaching spirit gold, which was found under the 2 iron ores in Lu Qingfeng's territory. Such a precious treasure could not be left to Wei merchant. The cultivation base of Lu Buwei was at least an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, and because of the limitation of the 5 ghost transportation technique, he could only travel around the world laboriously. If he could find enough spatial breaching spirit gold with a large enough volume, he could build a super long-distance teleportation formation. With that, he would be able to quickly bring a large number of men and travel around the world. It had been quite some time since Lu Qingfeng became Zhuguozheng, and Yin Dan had only given him 1 year to make a contribution. No matter what, Yin Dan had to come up with a good plan for Lu Qingfeng. Whether it was a face-saving project or a political achievement project, in the near future, he had to make Lu Qingfeng gain some fame and reputation as soon as possible. Although he had spared the lives of a few white cranes, Wuxia did not want to let them have a good time. When he was climbing over those ancient pines, he forcefully kicked a few huge cranes' nests off the branches, falling down into the deep cliff. A large flock of white cranes flapped their wings and flew up into the sky, crying shrilly in panic. Meanwhile, Wuxia was laughing out loud, climbing all the way to the bottom of the cliff. Blue Moon and Purple Moon's laughter came to an abrupt stop. The sisters stared at Wuxia, who was as tiny as a sesame seed, and felt a suffocating feeling in their hearts. This man was too unreliable. How could he be so calculative with a bunch of feathered animals? Chapter 137. Deep within the imperial palace of Great Yan dynasty, in a palace that occupied a vast area, Princess Zhonglu was seen lying on a large bed, lost in thought. Through a few layers of pale green gauze curtains, one could see that the sun was shining brightly outside. Together with some palace maids, Baizhuer and Baizuer were quietly entering and exiting the room, tidying up all sorts of miscellaneous items. In Princess Zhongli's bedchamber, not to mention the luxurious furnishings, there were 3 huge jade tables carved with floral patterns placed right in the center of the room, which made them extremely eye-catching. On one of the tables were placed several dozens of chessboards made from different materials, but all of them were extremely precious and rare. The chess pieces were made from precious gems, gemstones, pearls, and many other precious materials. Countless chess pieces were piled messily on the chessboard, scattering on the pale green carpet. Together with a few palace maids, Baizhur was quietly picking up these chess pieces, sorting them into different categories and placing them into the chess boxes carved from jade. On the other table, a dozen jade zither were piled up messily. All of these zither were ancient and colorful, and were made from various rare and precious spirit woods and spirit jades. The strings were either made from the tendons of flood dragons, or the threads of 10,000 years old spirit creatures, or the long threads melted and condensed from spirit jades of water element. All of them were extremely rare items in the world. On the last table, a couple dozens of large drawing papers were spread out, as white as snowflakes. On a few of them, countless characters were written in small characters, all of which were the poem Lovers from the South and the North, which was plagiarized by Wuxia. Perhaps he had written the poem several hundred times, over and over again. On the other drawing papers, ink and brush were dripping messy. No one could tell what was written on them. If Wuxia were here, he would comment that these words looked like the graffiti of a 3-year-old kid, and did not have the slightest foundation in painting. The tree he drew looked like a featherless chicken claw, and the person he drew looked like a matchstick stuck in dough. The animals he drew looked like they had been washed and stripped clean, and had been stewed in a pot of soup until they became deformed. A few high-quality inkstones were dripping with ink, and dozens of fine brushes made from the fur of demon beasts were randomly thrown onto the jade table. The jade table with a radius of several zhang was in a mess, as if dozens of wild dogs had ravaged it. Meanwhile, Baizhur, together with a dozen or so palace maids, began to tidy up all the items in the chamber, restoring them to their original state as quickly as possible. Princess Zhonglu was lying on the bed with her hair disheveled. She tilted her head and watched them work. She swung her bare feet back and forth, her light pink toes picking up the thin blanket from time to time and waving it around. After a long while, when she saw that Baizhur and the others were almost done with their work, Princess Zhonglu yawned lazily and said, "Zhur, do you think it's better for me to get up now or go back to sleep?" Clapping her hands, Baizhur came before Princess Zhongli's window, bent over and said with a smile on her face, "Princess, you better get up quickly. For the past 2 days, apart from doing your homework at night, you've been sleeping all the time. Even if you've formed the Jin Dan, do you think it's good for your health?" Holding her chin with both hands, Princess Zhonglu breathed out a long sigh and said, "What should I do if I get up?" Grandpa couldn't figure it out this time, so he came out to govern the city. No one in G City dares to cause any trouble, and we can't even watch the show. That little fellow Wuxia has actually gone to heaven-breaking sword sect for some unknown reason. I haven't seen him for more than 10 days. Tell me, what could he be doing in heaven-breaking sword sect? He even borrowed Sister Lady Medicine's crafting room to craft something? He better not burn down the Immortal's cave of sword stems from the mind. Baizhur smiled. Deftly, she tied up Princess Zhongli's hair into a bun, and carefully combed her hair until not a single strand of hair was out of place. It looked like she had gotten used to combing Princess Zhongli's hair when she was still lying on the bed. Although the posture was not right, the quality of the bun was impeccable. While she was busy, she smiled and said, "It's hard to say. Didn't Marquis Wu buy a lot of metals and materials from Market of Four Seas? Perhaps he wants to craft a sword, or perhaps he wants to craft something else. A Taoist of Xiantian realm can also craft something nice." Twitching her lips, Princess Zhonglu twisted her body, frowned and said unhappily, "If he wants something, he can just tell me directly. I'll get it from the Imperial Treasury. Why does he have to work so hard himself? Really, he has wasted more than 10 days of time, and he doesn't even know how to spend the time with me?" Baizhur dared not to say anything, but kept busy helping Princess Zhonglu to tie up her hair into a bun. Sighing lightly, Princess Zhonglu waved her hand casually. Immediately, several dozens of gauze curtains hanging down from the ceiling in the bedchamber flew up and hung on the hooks next to her. One of the walls of the bedchamber slowly opened up, revealing a huge room, measuring several hundred feet in both width and length. Neatly arranged sandalwood racks were piled with all kinds of clothes. Tilting her head, Princess Zhonglu looked at the room and asked worriedly, "What kind of dress should I wear today?" "No matter how you look at it, I have so many dresses. But I only have 2 or 3. The same color, the same appearance, what a headache. Sighing faintly, Princess Zhongli twitched her mouth and asked in a daze, "What should I eat for breakfast? Still lotus seed cake and 5 meters of porridge? Change to something else? But what should I eat? Ugh, strange. Why should I eat breakfast now? As a Jin Dan human immortal, I can eat the wind and drink the dew." Her pretty face suddenly turned gloomy. Looking up into the sky, Princess Zhongli breathed out a long sigh and said, "How pitiful, I can't even eat breakfast. Eating the wind and drink the dew, isn't that the same as drinking the northwest wind? Compared to this, it's better to eat breakfast." With a gloomy face, Princess Zhongli tilted her head again, frowned and murmured to herself, "Will Wuxia go down the mountain today? Not go down the mountain? Go down the mountain? Not go down the mountain? If he still doesn't come out, I'll just rush into the immortal's cave and drag him out. But the sword stems from the mind has a very tight restrictive spell. There's no way I can rush into the immortal's cave. Even Grandpa Emperor can't do it, let alone me. What is Sister Yaonu doing? Why is she in seclusion?" After sighing for a while, Princess Zhongli continued to worry. "If Wuxia go down the mountain today, what kind of clothes should I wear to meet him? What kind of shoes should I wear? What kind of jewelry should I wear on my head? Does he like delicate jewelry or elegant jewelry? Heavy makeup or light makeup? Light makeup? Heavy makeup makes my face so uncomfortable." A bird cry was heard, and a green bird with a long tail, shaped like a peacock, but only the size of a palm, flew down from the sky at a high speed and crashed into the bedchamber. Seeing Princess Zhongli, the bird flapped its wings happily and flew toward Princess Zhongli. Princess Zhongli was startled at first, then overjoyed. She grabbed the bird with one hand and pulled out a small golden ring from under its wing in an extremely barbaric manner, then took out a small paper scroll from inside. On it was a secret mark of the scouting office, as well as a simple sentence. "Marquis Tianyan has left the immortal's cave, sword stems from the heart." Great! Princess Zhongli threw the bird in her hand out. The bird was caught unprepared, and was smashed onto the table by Princess Zhongli. The poor bird rolled its eyes and fell to the ground, its wings and legs twitching. Princess Zhongli had already jumped off the bed and shouted, "Quick, help me change my clothes and make up. Hurry, go to the city gate and stop Wuxia. This time, he must accompany me to Zhongli's garden for a month." Palace maids quickly rushed over and helped Princess Zhongli change her clothes and make up her clothes at the quickest speed. Right after everything was done, Princess Zhongli held a bowl of porridge in her left hand and took 2 mouthfuls of porridge, while her right hand held 2 snacks and quickly swallowed them. After that, she brought Bai Zhuer and ran out of the palace. 8 ghost immortals, each shrouded in towering energy, and several hundred palace guards quickly followed behind, surrounding Princess Zhongli in the middle. Right after the procession walked out of Princess Zhongli's bedchamber, went around a few palaces, and was about to leave the palace, Tuoba Haofeng had already entered the palace with a few attendants, followed by a few imperial eunuchs, and just happened to bump into Princess Zhongli's procession. Sitting in the coach, Princess Zhongli's face darkened when she saw Tuoba Haofeng's smiling face. Without hesitation, she gave out an order. "Somebody break Tuoba Haofeng's limbs and throw him out of the palace." Do you really think I'm so easy to deceive? That dead bastard Tuoba Qingye is not a good man, and you, Tuoba Haofeng, are not a good man either. Since you purposely came to trouble Wuxia, you must be a bad man. Somebody break him. Break his limbs and throw him out of the palace. Immediately, over 30 palace guards leaped forward like wolves and tigers, pressing down on Tuoba Haofeng, who dared not to resist, and were about to give him a brutal beating. Tuoba Haofeng, whose heart was filled with hatred, hastily cried out, "Your Highness Princess Zhongli, the purpose of your humble servant's visit is to deliver young Miss Yu's invitation card. Young Miss Yu is holding a poetry and painting meeting on the myriad Red River, and she has invited all the most famous talented men and women in G City. Your humble servant dares not to offend your Highness. Young Miss Yu knows that I can enter the palace to meet your Highness, and that's why she asked me to bring this invitation card to your Highness." Princess Zhongli was struck dumb. She frowned and asked, Poetry and painting meeting? Young Miss Yu Qianqian's poetry and painting meeting? Why didn't I know anything about it? Tuoba Haofeng let out a few hollow laughs. Carefully, he glanced around at the palace guards who were pressing down on him, and a few of his attendants. He snorted coldly, then said with a deep voice, "Release him." Tuoba Haofeng, I'm usually the first one to know about Yu Qianqian's poetry and painting meeting. Why do you need to deliver the invitation card this time? Carefully, Tuoba Haofeng handed over a light green name card to one of the palace guards, asking the guard to hand it over to Princess Zhonglu. Princess Zhonglu opened the name card and gave it a glance, then casually handed it over to Bai Zhuer. After that, she turned to look at Tuoba Haofeng and said, "Tell me, why didn't I hear anything about it this time?" Tuoba Haofeng bowed his head and said carefully, "Young Miss Yu's poetry and painting meeting is just an impromptu idea. The meeting is going to last for 7 days, allowing everyone to display their talents to their heart's content, and strive to produce some exquisite poems and paintings. Today is already the 3rd day. Initially, I wanted to inform Princess earlier, but Princess has been in a bad mood for the past few days. However, young Miss Yu has asked about Princess again today. That's why I boldly entered the palace." Princess Zhonglu was struck dumb. She glared at Tuoba Haofeng and snapped, "Do I have a bad temper?" An invisible pressure came whistling out, forcing Tuoba Haofeng and a few of his attendants to stagger backward. Tuoba Haofeng was the first to bear the brunt of the pressure, coughing out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Princess Zhonglu was taken aback. Then she smiled embarrassedly and said, "Zhuer, is it true that I have a bad temper these past few days?" Bai Zhuer smiled faintly and said nothing. Shaking her head, Princess Zhonglu frowned and said, "Tuoba Haofeng, bring me to the meeting at the Myriad Red River. Zhuer, bring some men and wait for Marquis Wu at the city gate. When he arrives, ask him to look for us at the Myriad Red River. Tell him, if he doesn't come, I'll tear down Duke Yan Li's mansion when I return to the city." Bai Zhuer answered hastily, then brought a couple dozens of palace guards and left on another coach. Princess Zhonglu and her company went to the Myriad Red River. At the same time, Lu Qingfeng was invited by a few important ministers of Great Yan Dynasty to a restaurant for a banquet. The last man in Ji City who had a friendly relationship with Wuxia, Yan Jiuhui, was summoned by Qin Qingshui to the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office to participate in the so-called internal purging meeting of Scouting Office. All the people in Ji City who were close to Wuxia, who had power and information channels, and who could come to his rescue had been transferred away. Chapter 138. His mouth was filled with the fragrant aftertaste of the wine. Wuqi laughed and waved goodbye to Haoying Fengying. The banquet took Wuqi 4 hours. 10 jars of fine wine that had aged over 100 years old were worth the time to savor the aftertaste. These 10 jugs of century-old wine were brewed using the secret technique of the Haoying clan. It was called the 100-fruit and 100-flower honey wine. It was sweet, fragrant, and extremely fragrant, and it had the effect of strengthening the soul and strengthening the vitality of a cultivator. Usually, it was used as a spirit medicine as a tribute, and it was offered to Yandan and various members of the imperial clan who held great power during the new year. After drinking the wine, Wuqi felt a little intoxicated. When he walked, his head felt heavy and his feet felt light, and his mind was not as agile as before. The wine was good, but it was too strong. Wuqi didn't want to use his innate energy to force out the wine, as it would be a waste of this fine wine. Since Haoying Fengying had brought him such a fine wine, he had to let it stay in his stomach and slowly digest it. By befriending Haoying Fengying, not only would he have a helper in heaven-breaking sword sect, he could also form a relationship with Haoying clan. This was a good thing. Riding on the single-horned deer, Wuqi laughed, spurred the horse and left Mount White Sunday. The sun was high up in the sky, and it was noon. If he rushed back to Ji City, he could still make it in time to have lunch with Lu Qingfeng. Apart from the minor universal teleportation formation, Wuqi had also crafted several hundred formation discs of various colors. He wanted to give all of them to Lu Qingfeng, as he was, after all, studying the Tao of formation. and they would be very helpful to him. With about 70 to 80% of the wine in his body, Wuxia left Mount White Sun, laughing and singing along the way. Perhaps Wuxia felt that he had not drunk enough. As he took out another wine jar the size of a human head from his storage ring, he kept pouring wine into his mouth while walking along the main road towards Ji City. The condition of the roads in Great Yin Dynasty was very good. Not only were the roads flat and wide, both sides of the roads were planted with towering trees that stood over 20 feet tall. The shade of the trees formed a huge canopy that blocked the sunlight. The road was cool and refreshing, and no one could feel the heat from the sun. Riding the single-horned elk on the main road, Wuxia drank wine and tore open his clothes, revealing a large part of his chest, singing loudly all the way. For some unknown reason, although the main road leading to Ji City was usually crowded with carriages and pedestrians, Wuxia was the only one walking on the road today. Looking ahead and back along the straight road, he couldn't see a single person for several tens of li. However, Wuxia, who was still intoxicated, did not notice this. He continued to enjoy the cool breeze all the way, singing and drinking to his heart's content. All of a sudden, a barely discernible cry came from a patch of reed-like grass under a few trees by the roadside. "Help, help!" The cry for help came from a woman's gentle voice. Along with the cry for help came the sound of a dozen or so people hurriedly flying away. The wind came blowing from the patch of grass, bringing a pungent smell of blood to Wuqi's nostrils. Casually, Wuxia threw away the wine jar, laughed wildly and leaped into the air. With just a few steps, he arrived at the patch of grass, casually throwing out a punch. A muffled boom rang out, and the patch of grass within the circumference of several tens of feet was shattered into pieces by the force of the punch. Countless bits of grass were blown away by the strong wind, revealing two broken carriages lying in the grass patch. They were two luxurious carriages inlaid with gold and jade. Those who could ride in such carriages were either rich or noble. But now, the carriages were violently smashed into pieces like firewood. 6 magnificent beasts were lying next to the carriages. Next to the beasts were over 30 men, who were no longer breathing. Their necks were nearly chopped off, and a large amount of internal organs were oozing out from the hideous wounds on their bodies. The strong wind came blowing from the front, bringing the gentle voice of a woman. The woman was still screaming for help, but very soon, her mouth seemed to be muffled, and she could no longer make any sound. The sound of breaking wind went further and further away, and before long, it had already traveled a few miles away. Wuqi's ears twitched, and his divine sense had already locked onto the sound that was going further away. He laughed in a strange tone and said indifferently, "Old trick, really too old trick. Luring the enemy deep in, luring the snake out of its hole, ambushing from 10 sides. What else can I say except old trick? But for a young hero with a sense of justice like me, aren't I born for this kind of scene?" Then he patted the head of the single-horned deer. The deer let out a long and sonorous cry, then chased after the direction where the sound of breaking wind had disappeared like a gust of wind. While gulping down the wine, Wuxia raised his head and shouted to the sky, "Young lady, don't worry with me here, no one can touch a single hair of yours. Hey you bastards, in broad daylight, you're raping innocent women. Is there any justice left in this world? Is there any law left?" While yelling all sorts of nonsense, Wuxia rode his horse and chased after them for several dozens of miles. Above a large expanse of long grass, he saw a group of dozens of men in black, leaping out from the grass from time to time, stepping on the tips of the grass and sprinting forward at top speed. These men had the cultivation base of peak Hotian realm, and that was why they could step on the grass and fly forward at top speed. However, their meridians were not long enough, and after they sprinted forward for a short distance, they would have to land on the grass and catch their breath. That was why Wuxia could catch up with them so easily. On the shoulder of the leading man in black, there was a young girl, who was clad in a long white dress and had her mouth stuffed with a piece of white cloth. The young girl was struggling with all her might. Once in a while, she raised her head and saw Wuxia approaching her at top speed from a distance of several hundred feet away. Her beautiful big eyes were filled with a boundless joy. Hastily, she turned to look at Wuxia and tried her best to let out a cry for help. Once again, Wu Qi cried out with a stern voice. You bastard! How can we allow people like you to do whatever you want in the territory of Great Yin Dynasty? Quickly follow me into the city, and I might still be able to beg for mercy in front of His Majesty. You are robbing girls right outside of G City. This is not giving His Majesty any face, you are slapping His Majesty's face. Wu Qi continued with a loud voice. If it was during the period when 8 princes were supervising the state, I would have nothing to say when you are slapping their face. But during these 2 months, His Majesty has come out from his secluded cultivation, and personally came to the imperial court to handle the state affairs. How dare you commit such an illegal act during the period when His Majesty is ruling the state? You are not giving His Majesty any face. You, all of you should have your entire clan executed. Suddenly, the group of fleeing men in black halted their steps. A cold gleam flashed, as a dozen oddly shaped long blades spun in all directions, slicing out an empty space of several tens of feet in circumference in the middle of the long grass. Surprisingly, these men in black had formed a standard formation that could only be found in an army, charging towards Wu Qi with a defensive stance and an offensive stance. The leader of the men in black cried out sternly, "This fellow is annoying. Let's kill him and continue our journey." These men in black raised their left hands. Suddenly, a large sheet of cold gleam shot out from under their sleeves, as countless tiny needles that were as fine as cow hair were activated by a machine. Together with a faint fishy aroma, they thrust towards Wu Qi. These needles were even finer than cow hair, and they took on a dark red hue. Together with the strange poisonous aroma, one could easily tell that these needles were dipped in a deadly poison. Wu Qi let out a loud laugh, then forcefully shook the wine jar in his hand. The wine inside the jar clattered noisily, and countless crystal-clear water droplets shot out from the jar, accurately hitting nearly 1,000 tiny needles. The needles were knocked back by the wine, and pierced into the bodies of those men in black. These men in black let out miserable howls, while a large amount of white smoke rose from their bodies. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies had turned into a puddle of pus. Wu Qi could not help but gasp and murmured, "This is indeed the world of immortals, where one can fly freely in the sky and burrow underground. Even this deadly poison is so deadly, many times more poisonous than the prickles I brought out from Meng Mountains. TSK, even if it is just aqua regia, how long would it take to corrode a person into a puddle of pus?" Shaking his head and sighing, Wu Qi leaped down from his mount, staggered a little, and slowly walked towards the girl who was thrown onto the empty ground by the leader of the men in black. After burping a few times, Wu Qi shouted from afar, Miss, are you alright?" Seeing that your clothes are still intact. I suppose the most important thing for a woman is still with you. You should be fine." As he staggered a few feet away from the girl had already pulled off the white cloth that covered her mouth. Panicked, the pretty girl threw herself at Wu Qi's thigh and said, "Save me, my benefactor, please save me. I'm in a great calamity, please take pity on me." Laughing wildly, Wu Qi thrust his leg up and gave the girl a heavy kick on her face, sending her flying several hundred feet away. The girl waved her arms and legs in the air, howling miserably. A large amount of blood sprayed out from her mouth, and at the same time, a large handful of white and shiny teeth sprayed out from her mouth. The girl screamed miserably and fell heavily to the ground. After a long time, she stood up tremblingly from the ground. The girl, who had a large black footprint in the middle of her face and blood kept gushing out from her mouth, cried out in a stern voice, "Wu Qi, how did you find out my flaw?" She turned her left hand over, and a strangely shaped dagger appeared in the girl's hand. The dagger was no longer than a finger, and was as thin as a cicada's wing, and as narrow as a willow leaf. The dagger was completely black, as if it had been coated with a thick layer of black paint. At first glance, anyone could tell that this dagger had been dipped in poison. If she had approached Wu Qi just now, as long as this dagger slightly scratched Wu Qi's thigh, nothing good would have happened to him. Staring at the dagger in the girl's hand, Wu Qi dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. He dropped the wine jar and gave the girl an answer that he didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. You're with these bandits? Heavens, luckily this Marquis is lucky. This Marquis has drunk too much, and kicking people has already become a habit. As soon as I saw you pouncing towards this marquee, your head looked as round as a ball. The girl was stunned, letting the blood drip down from her chin and stain her clothes. After a full 3 breaths of time, the girl finally raised her head and screamed in exasperation. Wuxia, how dare you make fun of me? I don't care if you're just used to it, or if you've really found out that something is wrong. You're dead today. All of you, come out and kill this bastard for me. Suddenly, the sound of sharp swords being unsheathed rang out from several thousand feet away. Sword lights flashed in all directions. At least 32 warriors of body-strengthening tier of Xiantian realm, and above were walking slowly towards Wuxia with swords in their hands. Behind those Xiantian warriors came the sound of orderly and heavy footsteps. Wuqi's ears twitched slightly. Judging from the sound, he could tell that he was surrounded by at least 3,000 well-trained soldiers. For a Xiantian warrior, it was extremely difficult to kill a real Xiantian warrior, no matter if it was an army of thousands of men and horses, or a group of warriors of the same level. Only by using a group of Xiantian warriors who had an absolute advantage, and then using a large number of soldiers to besiege the enemy, could they have a 100% chance of killing a Xiantian warrior. 32 Xiantian warriors of physique-strengthening tier, and more than 3,000 elite soldiers. They wouldn't stop until they killed Wuxia. Sighing lightly, Wuxia looked at the 32 warriors, who were approaching him step by step, and said in a long voice, "It's not just these people, right? Are there any more ambushes? Come out. It looks like I'm going to die here. Show me all the arrangements you've made, so that I can die in peace." After a long silence, a gust of wind suddenly rolled up from the ground, and on top of a small mound 3 miles away, 2 Jindan human immortal cultivators appeared out of nowhere. One of them shouted in a low voice, "Wuxia, you're going to die here today." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.